my talk, I'll talk to you a little bit about how the application process works if you decide that that is something that you want to do. As Emma says, my name is Becca Williams. I'm based at Pembroke College. I'm one of the 2 law tutors there. My areas of specialism are criminal law and public law. But I do a lot of work now on law and digital tech, which is what most of my research is about. And like Emma says, I've been the admissions coordinator this year. So I can talk to you about the admissions process and how that works. So why might you want to think about studying law? And obviously, one answer to that, the most obvious answer, is because it's a really good route to becoming a lawyer. It's the most straightforward route and probably the easiest route to becoming a lawyer. But the 2 things are independent. So you can become a lawyer without studying law. And if you study law, you don't have to become a lawyer. So it's not like if you choose to do a law degree, you're committing yourself to being a lawyer for the rest of your life. You absolutely don't have to do that. In fact, a law degree is a really, really good foundation for whatever you think you might want to do for the rest of your life. It has a lot of what employers call transferable skills in it. So a lot of the stuff that we teach you, a lot of the skills that you will pick up alongside learning what the law is, those skills are then things that you can go on to use in whatever walk of life you end up in, whatever your job ends up being. So what are those skills? Well, the first thing that we will teach you is the ability to take a huge amount of information and digest it really quickly, figure out which of the bits you need to read, which are the bits that you don't need to read, how to get the important points out of an article or a case and make notes on them so you've got that important information and you've binned all the rest of the stuff that was there. So the ability to fill it out, the stuff that you need from a lot of information, and to digest it and analyse it and think about it, that's an incredibly valuable skill to have. It can be quite daunting. So people arrive and they see their reading list for the first time and they go, oh my goodness, I can't read all of that. Well, no, you can't read all of that. And that's exactly what you're going to learn. You're going to learn which of the bits of the sources that have been put on the reading list are the bits that you need to read and which are the bits that you don't need to read. And you will gradually, over the course of that first term, get better and better and better at filleting that information. And we'll give you classes and so on to help you learn how to do that. So that by the end of your first term, we can give you a wad of stuff and you can just fillet it really quickly, figure out what you need to know, get the important stuff out of it and not worry about the rest and do it in the time available. And that's an incredibly important skill. Might be that you go on to work for the civil service and somebody says, you know, here's all the kind of research reports that we've done on where we should build this bridge. You know, can you go through all of that data on where we should build the bridge and all the surveys and all the, you know, reports and tell me what I need to know about it? And you can produce 1 or 2 pages out of this big wad of information for your boss that says, you know, here's what I think you should do given all the information available. Or, you know, it might be that you work for a company and somebody says, look, here's all the sales reports for the last few years, or here's all our data on the logistics that we use in this company. Can you figure out what it is that we're doing, what we could perhaps do better? Write me a report on that. And again, you can do that. So it really doesn't matter what the information is that you learn to do that with. In a law degree, it will be law that you learn it with. It really won't matter what you go on to use that for in the rest of your life. That ability to take a huge amount of information, figure out what are the most important bits, keep those, bin the rest, that's a really, really useful skill for any employer to find in you. So employers will want to employ you because you've done a law degree, even if they aren't legal employers that you're thinking of working for. The other thing that we will do is we will teach you to write really effectively. So a lot of universities will maybe set you an essay for every half term or every half semester or whatever. We will set you at least 1, sometimes 2 essays per week. Not massively long ones, about 1,200 words, but you will have to do a lot of writing. And again, at the beginning, you think, goodness me, that's a major thing to do. By the middle of your second year, what I'm trying to do with my second years is get them to wake up and think about the process of writing because they're doing it on autopilot. They've got so good at doing it that they can just churn out essays without thinking about them. And my job in the second year is to say, no, switch your brains back on again. Let's think about this, and think about how we can improve your essay writing. You will get huge amounts of feedback on your essays. So we'll talk about the tutorial system a bit more in a minute. But that will mean that a tutor marks your essay and goes through your essay with you every week so that you know where you went, where you did things well, what you could improve on, and you can see your progress over the course of the term. You will do an essay a week for that tutor over the course of an 8-week term, and you'll be able to see yourself progress and improve. And again, what that means is that by the end of it all, so even by the end of your first year, never mind the end of your degree, you will be able to write really effectively. And again, That means you go out into a place of work, somebody asks you to write a report on something, and that's just a no-brainer for you. You can do that, no problem at all. That's what you're used to doing. Whereas somebody who's a bit less practiced, who hasn't had that opportunity during their degree, they're going to struggle a bit more. So you're going to be really, really good at doing that. We also teach you to think for yourself on the course. So we don't just want you to read that information and make notes on it. We want you to think about it. You know, every case you read, what would you have decided? Did the court make the right decision? Would you have come to a different decision? When somebody writes an article and we give you that to read, do you think they're right? They're arguing that the law should be reformed in a particular way. Do you agree? Is that what you would do? If you were writing an article, how would you say the law should be reformed? Are we getting the law right at the moment? So we ask you to think about what you're doing critically all the time, not just sit there passively and absorb it, but really engage with it and decide what your views on it are. And your views are really important, and they're part of what we encourage you to put in those essays that you're writing. So again, you will find that by the time, possibly you do this already, but you'll certainly find that by the time you've been here for a little bit, you will listen to a politician being interviewed on the radio and you'll think, yeah, that doesn't make sense though, does it? You said this thing, but that thing is not actually connected to that thing. And before you've even realised it, your brain will have done that. It will have just figured out that there's a flaw in the argument, that actually something doesn't hang together properly as an argument. You've spotted what the weakness is without you even thinking about it. And that's because you will have this ability to think critically. You'll read stuff on social media and you'll think that makes no sense. And I can see why it makes no sense. And I can give you 3 reasons why it makes no sense. And again, your brain will just do that. And you'll think, gosh, where did that come from? But it is just that that's what your brain will have been taught to do over the course of your time here. One of the things that we'll teach you to do to help with that is we will teach you to make very fine logical distinctions, to really think quite carefully and subtly about things. So yes, we're learning to do this quite rapidly and be very efficient, but also quite deep and quite subtle about things. Sometimes what look like 2 very similar cases can in fact have a subtle difference between them, or a very fine distinction, but actually that distinction is quite important and perhaps ought to lead to different results in terms of how those 2 cases are treated, maybe. And so that's the kind of distinction that we will teach you to make, to spot things like the difference between somebody foreseeing something personally themselves and the idea maybe that the world at large would have foreseen that thing in that particular circumstance. Those are 2 slightly different things. They sound similar, but they are actually subtly different. And you will talk about whether the law should treat those 2 scenarios the same. So again, one of the things we'll teach you to do is to spot those distinctions and notice them and think about what impact they might have. And again, that means that you will have a really useful skill, whatever data or information you go on to apply that skill to in future, that ability to spot little differences and go, actually, I've just spotted something in these notes, and maybe that's making the difference that we're then seeing, somewhere else in the company. That kind of ability is really useful and really valuable to employers. And the other thing that we'll teach you to do is to think about how rules work in practice and what incentives different rules might create. How might rules get people to behave in certain ways or not behave in certain ways? There's a famous example, you might have heard of it, which some economists studied a while ago, which is about a nursery in Israel. And week in, week out, people were turning up late to pick up their kids. The nursery was supposed to shut at 5:30 or whatever it was. People were turning up at 5:45 going, oh, I'm so sorry, everyone, late to pick up my kids. So the nursery thought, right, we've had enough of this, not fair to the staff. We're going to start charging people. And, if they don't pick their kids up at 5:30, we're going to charge them for every 5 minutes after that they're late. Who thinks that means that the parents turned up on time at 5:30 and then on? Okay, who thinks it means that they didn't? So you guys are all right. It had exactly the inverse effect of what they were anticipating. They thought it would incentivize people to turn up on time. Instead, the parents went, paying for it now. Doesn't matter if I turn up late. It's kind of a service that I'm buying, isn't it? So, it doesn't matter to the nursery if I turn up late because I'm giving them extra money. So there's no problem. Then, having realised that, the nursery took the rules away and said, we won't charge you if you're late. And it still didn't go back to how it was before. It still didn't mean that people turned up on time. Once they'd broken that sense on the part of the parent of, oh my goodness, I've done it wrong again and I really must try harder and this is really not fair to the staff. Once they'd broken that sort of sensation and that thought process, they couldn't put it back again. So even taking away the charges didn't reverse people's behaviour. They still turned up even later. So it's a really good example of a situation where you put a rule in place because you think it's going to have one effect. But actually, if you look at the effect it actually has, it's the complete opposite. And quite a lot of the time in law, that can happen, that you can have unintended consequences. Maybe the rule does do some of what you wanted, but it does a whole bunch of other things as well. And so one of the things that we'll think about is, well, how will this rule make people act? If we don't take account of the fact that they didn't mean the thing, will that mean that, they behave better, or will it make them actually behave worse because they think, well, I can't control it anyway, so I might as well. So we'll think a lot about that. And again, thinking about incentives and how incentives make people behave, that's a really useful thing to know about whatever context. It might be that you're trying to get people to buy more of your products in a company, or it might be that you're a civil servant trying to figure out how to stop people parking in the wrong places in towns, or whatever it might be, or how do you incentivize people to buy solar panels to put on their roofs. Whatever it might be, it might not be a law thing at all that you go on to apply that to. That's still a really useful ability to think about, well, how do I create my incentive structure here to produce the outcome that I want and not produce any outcomes that I don't want. So we'll teach you all of those things, and that ability to think critically about huge amounts of information, make your own decisions about it, think about it from these perspectives, and then write it all up afterwards into a very brief paper which covers the points that you need to cover. That's an incredibly valuable set of skills that, to be honest, any employer would want. So even if you don't want to do law at the end of your course, a law degree is a really good thing to have. So that's why you might want to do law. Why might you want to do it here? Well, to be honest, if you don't really remember anything else about what I've said, that top line is probably the most important thing. Everything here is as good as we can possibly make it. And that is what everybody wants to achieve while they're here. So we as tutors want to get the best out of our students. We want to do the best research ourselves that we can possibly do. The people that you are surrounded with on your course, they will also be the people who want to achieve the most that they can possibly achieve during your degree. And that's a very energizing thing to be surrounded by. It might be at the moment that you have that in your school. It might be that you don't have that in your school. And certainly when I was at school, I was relatively unusual in wanting to do academic work because that was not really very cool in my school. And it's nice to come and be somewhere where actually everybody feels like that. And that's really what everybody is here to do, and everybody's aim and objective. And that's a really nice thing to be surrounded by. Unsurprisingly, if you put those two things together, students who want to do really well and are themselves excellent, with teaching and facilities that are as good as they can possibly be made, you end up with excellent results. And again, that is a thing that has not escaped the notice of employers. So we sort of have to beat employers away from pestering our students too much during their course. And we sort of say, just let them get the degree first, you can employ them afterwards, because employers are really, really keen to tempt you to go and work for them because they know how valuable an asset you're going to be. And that's because the results that we get here are really, really good. And everybody knows that. So in terms of career progression, about 75% of our graduates do go on to join the legal profession. Obviously, that's what a lot of people want to do when they come here to do a law degree. That's always their plan. But 25% of people don't, and that's not because they can't, that's because they don't want to, and because they have realised, as I say, that you can actually use a law degree to do anything. And if I think back over the time that I've been here since 2005, I've had students go and do all sorts of things. I've had them go and be Spanish teachers, I've had them become vicars, they've gone to work for magazines, they've gone to work for the civil service, you name it. I've probably had somebody who went off to do it with a law degree at the end of it, because there really is no limit to what you can do. So you can be a lawyer if you want to, but lots of people don't. And there's lots of other opportunities available. Lots of people go to work for NGOs and that kind of thing as well. While you're here, you will have access to some of the world's leading legal scholars in the things that you're studying. I quite often say that if you can go anywhere and you can read the textbook, if you come here, there's a fair chance you're going to be taught by the person who writes the textbook. At the very least, in a context like this, you will go to the lectures that person's giving. They will be working on the next edition of the textbook, or their other related research as they talk to you, and they will share that with you. So you have access while you're here to the cutting edge research that all my colleagues are doing in all our different disciplines, in all our different subjects. And that's an incredible amount of access that you have. I know lots of people who've gone off into practice and have sort of said, I had this point in the case, and I thought, I wish I could just have a tutorial with so-and-so again, because I'd really like to talk to them about this. And, that's it. That's the sort of access that you have while you're here to those people, which is incredibly valuable. We are probably the only leading law school in the world where our main means of teaching is basically paired tutorials. So one tutor and two of you in a room for an hour. If you are part of a year group of, say, 9 in a college, obviously that's an odd number. One of the groups is going to have to be a group of 3. If you have a particular disability, like, for example, you can't hear, or, you might have some other disability, then you might well be supervised individually. Not necessarily, not if you don't want to be, but if that makes things easier for you, then you might well have an individual tutorial, just one of you and the tutor. But by and large, most tutorials are done in pairs, 2 of you and 1 tutor. And that's for an hour, typically every week through an 8-week term. So you get to know that tutor really well, they get to know you really well. That means when they come to write you references, they know a lot about you and can write you a really good reference, which is not necessarily something you'd get if you'd only ever been, one of 90 in another university. And you get to know them and you can ask them the questions that you have. They will do that business I was talking about of going through your written work with you and giving you feedback. But you can also, talk to them about anything else you were stuck on in the reading or any other questions that you might have coming from it. And they are there as that resource specifically for the purpose of helping you to do the best that you can in that subject. So we are pretty unique in doing that. Other universities do have tutorials, but they typically have more than 2 people as an average in those tutorials. We are pretty rare in only having 2 as the kind of standard number of people in the tutorial. Why it's brilliant to be here is our law library. So you might get a chance to poke your head into this afterwards. I think there might be some brief tours of it, but it's amazing. It has more than 40,000 law-related items, which is more than any other comparable library in the UK. It's what's called a copyright library, which means that by law, if you write a book on anything to do with anything in the UK, you have to deposit it with the Bodleian Library somewhere in Oxford. And if you write a book on law, then this is the library that book has to be deposited with. So every book on law that is published, the library gets a copy of it automatically if it's published in the UK. It also has fantastic, enormous international collections, EU collections, international more generally, whatever it is that you might want, the law library has it. Obviously, that's physical collections and you can see those, but especially over the course of the last 2 years, but to be honest anyway, it also has an incredible range of electronic resources. And when you come to Oxford, you get a thing called a single sign-on, which is like your digital key to everything in the university. And that key will allow you to continue to access those resources even when you're at home over the vacation. So it's like you can sort of walk virtually into the virtual library even when you're at home. And so it has this huge range of online resources as well. And most of the things that you want these days, almost everything that you would want to access, you can do that online. You can do it physically if you prefer to do that, but you can access it online if you want to do that too. The other thing that's amazing about the Bodleian is the people who work there. So the librarians who are there are just amazing. If there's something that you're struggling to get hold of, and I've done this with, quite random abstract historical stuff that I've needed to access, it's like a point of professional pride for them that they will get you that resource, whatever it takes. And because that's what they do, and they want to do that to the best of their capacity as well. So they are just amazing at getting hold of stuff. Even if you sort of say to them, I know somebody wrote this thing in about this date and it was probably in a book like this, can you help me? They will be able to find it for you. They are amazing. They're also lovely and really helpful and very, very student focused. So if you email them and say, look, my students are having trouble getting hold of this resource, it will be fixed. There will be a solution for it. They're incredibly good at helping. They do training sessions, ones that you have to do at the beginning of your course to learn how to use the resources, but also optional ones later for you to develop your skills in using a particular database or doing a particular thing. They are an amazing bunch of people and an amazing support to have. If you're struggling with anything, go to them and they will fix it for you, and they are really, really good. So those are the good things about Oxford. What might you be thinking about? So it might be that you're thinking, well, it sounds really good and I would quite like to go there. But we know that people quite often have reservations, that they think, oh, I'm not sure Oxford's for me because, and there's a bunch of things that can come into that because. One of the things people worry about is that Oxford is somehow going to be more expensive than other universities, and this is just absolutely not the case. So when universities were allowed to charge fees, we pretty much all chose to charge fees at the same level, which was the maximum level we were allowed to, and pretty much everybody chose to do that. And so that was a good example of a rule not having the effect that was anticipated for it. And so we do all charge the same level of fees, and Oxford's fees are no higher than any other universities. The difference is that we have always known here that finance was a potential barrier to people coming. It's always been something that we've worried about. And so when fees came in, that was obviously a particular concern for us. And so a lot of our alumni and a lot of other sources basically gave us pots of money that we can use to support people for whom that might be a financial barrier. So I can honestly say to you that it really should never be the case that anybody says, I would have liked to go to Oxford, but I couldn't afford it. That is just not a thing that needs to happen. So if you feel like that might apply to you for whatever reasons you have, please do get in touch with us and we will talk you through the different sources of support that are available. And they are very often more extensive here than you would find elsewhere, just because we've always had that history history of worrying about this problem. And so our alumni have had a history of trying to fund us to help us to deal with this problem, to make sure that there are pots of money available for people to use. I've put a link on the slide, which is to the bursary scheme. So that's the university level support systems, which there are in place, and you can have a look at those on the website. The other point about Oxford is you've always got university and colleges, so your college will also have separate sources of financial support in addition to what is available at university level. So there's two different potential targets of financial support that you can access. And I can tell you from my own college that we have funds like this, and we quite often, if we see the accounts at the end of the year, they still have money in them, which means we had more money available than we had people needing to make claims on it. So there really, really shouldn't be a reason for you to not come, which is a financial one. As I say, if you can't find the information on the college or the university websites to help you, and you're worried that that might be the case for you, please do get in touch with us, because we can solve that problem with you. Another thing that you might be forgiven for thinking if you read the press is that if you come here and you are from a state school, you will be in the minority. So we know that across the country, state school people are in the majority, but you very often are given the impression that that is not the case here. Well, that is just a myth. So the university in 2021 did a sort of data survey of the last few years of its data. And in that, which was the data from 2016 to 2020, the proportion of state school students in the university rose to 68.6%. 11.2% of our students come from the independent sector, and 20.2% of our students come from outside the UK. That's a good point to make as well, that when you're here, you'll be surrounded by a really diverse range of people. And I really like Freshers' Dinner, which is the first kind of dinner we have with our freshers when they first arrive in October, because you get to sit down and talk to 6 or 8 or whatever it is, really interesting people who've come from all over the world, had all sorts of different life experiences, have all sorts of different interests and hobbies and family backgrounds and whatever. And it's a really interesting time, because you've got this really interesting and diverse group of people to talk to. And that's what you will find with your colleagues in your college and the other people that you meet on your course, or, you know, playing your sport or whatever it is, that they do come from a really diverse and international range of backgrounds. But certainly our proportion of state school students is absolutely not inverse to our proportion of independent. In law, we are even better than the university statistics. So we're always ahead in law of any of these kind of statistics. It's always a kind of university one, and then we're always above it. So, for example, on this particular metric, our intake in 2020 was 75.4% state school students. So they are in the vast majority in our student cohorts. What we say is that we want the brightest and best people regardless of background, and that's true. If you are the best and the smartest person, you deserve to be here, and it doesn't matter what your particular context or background is. We'll love getting to know you as a person when you are here, but it's not part of how or why we're going to select you. If you want to see more about those statistics of our admissions on all sorts of fronts, the report that I'm quoting from is there on that link at the bottom. But to be honest, if you just Google something like Oxford admissions statistics or something like that, you'll probably get the reports that way. So if you want to see more detail, then it's all there. We put other universities off if you apply to Oxford. There's sometimes a sense that maybe some of our competitor universities might figure out that you're an Oxbridge candidate and say, oh, you know, that means we don't want them because they'll probably go to Oxbridge. That is not really a thing that you need to worry about either. There's no way you can tell from the Ucas form what other universities this candidate's applied to. So we as a university just get our own personalised version of your Ucas form. We don't see all the bits that go to other universities or relate to other universities. So we've got no idea where else you've applied. They've got no idea where else you've applied either. So you really don't need to worry about that. And you don't have to say anything specific about Oxford in your personal statement or anything else that would in any other way out your application as one which is applying to Oxford. You don't have to do that at all. So you can do a completely neutral application and no other university will see that it's coming to us. So you don't need to worry about that. Chances are, if you're really smart, other universities will be interested in you as well. And so that's not something that you need to worry about. Another thing people might have heard, and this was true in the past, is that maybe it matters which college you apply to. So do your chances of getting in, are they affected by which college you apply to? In the past, yes, that was a problem that we had. And we put a lot of work over the past few years, past 2 years in particular, into reforming our admissions process so that we now move people around a huge amount between the two colleges during the admission, between various different colleges during the admissions process. And so you will find that actually now it really shouldn't be the case that the college that you apply to affects your chances of getting in. That really shouldn't be something. We will monitor our data. We'll see how the reforms pan out. We'll look at the data coming out of them this year and next year as we start to use this new system and check that that's the case. And if it isn't, we'll amend it. But it looks at the moment like there would be no reason why the college choice would affect it, because we've put in place so many things to prevent that from happening. First of all, you can not make an application to a college at all if you want to. You can just make an open application. And again, a college will not know that you've done that. So you make an open application, the college assigns you, say, to Pembroke, and you come to me looking like you've applied to Pembroke. I don't know that you haven't, that you made an open application and the system gave you to me. I have no means of knowing that. I can't tell from my list of applicants who were the people who applied directly to me and who are the people who made an open application and got allocated to me. The system doesn't show you that. So you're not going to be at any disadvantage. It's not like a tutor's going to go, oh, you didn't apply to us to begin with. They won't even know. So you don't need to worry about that. I don't think they'd care if they did, but they can't see it anyway. So you can make an open application and then you are literally just applying to the law faculty effectively, and we'll put you somewhere, and that's fine. Even if you don't do that, if you do say, oh, you know, I went to St John's for lunch and I really, really loved it and I'd like to go to St John's, fine, put St John's down, that's absolutely fine. But I would say don't get too attached to it, because there is a much higher chance you won't go. Even if you get in, there is a higher chance that you won't go to the college you applied to probably than that you will. And that is because we do now do this business of moving people around the colleges. So before we invite people for interview, we spread them out. During the interview process, you'll be seen by one college, but there's a more than 50% chance you'll be seen by a second college later on in the week as well, because more than 50% of our applicants are now seen by a second college. You may find that you get an offer from a fourth college altogether, which didn't even interview you. And that's because what we want to do is across Oxford, we want to take the best, you know, the sort of top slice of people, and then we're just trying to find them a place in a college somewhere. So it's really at that point just about the logistics of making sure that all the people who need places have got a place to go to, and all the colleges who need people have got a person coming to them. So it's really about jiggling people around into the places across all of the colleges once we've decided as a faculty who are the top slice of our applicants. What we don't anymore have is a situation where individual colleges are having different strengths of applicant pools. That doesn't happen anymore. We move everybody around, and over the whole of Oxford, we take the top sort of slice of people and then find them a college to go to effectively. So as I say, you can apply to a college, you might end up at that college, but the chances are relatively small. So I would say don't get too attached to a college, even if you go today and you visit it and you absolutely love it. The other thing I can tell you is that whichever college you end up at, within 5 minutes of being there, it will be the best college in the universe, and you will not be able to imagine being anywhere else. And, you know, you think all other colleges are completely rubbish. I have never met anybody here for whom that wasn't the case. So, you know, wherever it is that you end up, you will become very attached to it very quickly. There'll be all sorts of benefits to it that you think, gosh, I can't imagine being anywhere else. And you will be absolutely fine. And a lot of our, as you'll see in a minute when I talk about the teaching, a lot of what we do now is done centrally. So to be honest, the college is the place where you live. It's where your accommodation is. And it's certainly where some of your, you know, extracurricular stuff that you do, your sports and whatever happen. But in terms of your degree, a lot of that happens centrally anyway. So it doesn't make as much of a difference as it might have done in the past where you end up. So other things that you might be thinking, especially, you know, if you sort of looked around other bits of Oxford for the rest of today, think, oh gosh, it's very formal and traditional, isn't it? It's not really who I am or where I come from. And I know, because I felt like that as well when I was in your position. And you're right, some things are really formal and traditional. So that's a picture of my office in the bottom left-hand corner. That's at Pembroke, and my office is a very lovely old building, has no central heating, but is otherwise very lovely and beautiful. And there are lots of very old, beautiful buildings around the city. You will have to wear those clothes from time to time. So the bottom picture is people, I think, matriculating, which is a ceremony that you go through when you first arrive to make you members of the university. People at the top right are on the other end of the spectrum. They're graduating, they're getting their degrees, which they do in the Sheldonian. Both of those things happen in the Sheldonian Theatre in normal times. So you will have to put those strange clothes on from time to time. We do poll people every so often. So one of the times you have to wear them is for exams. And every couple of years, we send a student poll out and we say, do you really want to carry on wearing what's called subfusk, this sort of strange outfit for your exams? And every time from everybody, we get an overwhelming response that says, yeah, actually, I kind of do, because it sort of gives me a sense of ceremony. And the thing is that those things look formal and like barriers when you're on the outside. But when you come here, they're part of what you're entitled to, and it might be the only chance in your life that you get to do stuff like that, because it isn't what you get to do by and large for also the rest of your life. So it's quite, people just actually quite like it. They think, well, no, this is a tradition I belong to now. What this says is that this is an amazing institution which has been here for hundreds of years, and I'm part of it now, and I kind of want to wear the clothes that say that I'm part of it because I'm entitled to do that. So we keep asking the students if they want to change, and they never seem to do that, and that's the reason why. So for all it might look formal at this point, people do seem to quite like it when they get here, and it certainly doesn't seem to bother anybody that they have to dress up like that. They just tend to see it as kind of a bit of fun, and it gives them a sense of occasion, and they take lots of photographs of themselves. Lots of people have their profile photo, it's their photo of themselves in this outfit, so people do seem to like it, and that's from all walks of life. That's whoever those people are. And of course, not everything is old and traditional here. Actually, I mean, this building for start is 1960s, but it's certainly not old and traditional in that sense. And the Bodleian Law Library, you can see, I was saying to you before, you know, in terms of it being state of the art, it is as state of the art as you could possibly want from a law library, certainly in terms of its, you know, online facilities and its virtual facilities, but even in terms of its physical space. Most colleges will have a new build sector as well. So yes, all colleges tend to have, apart from St Catherine's, they mostly have sort of some old buildings, but a lot of colleges will also have a new build pod as well. So the two pictures there's two pictures in the corners of St Catherine's. The one that's sort of at twilight is of my college, Pembroke, and that's our new build pod. We've got that bridge which goes over the road. So we've got old buildings to the right of that picture, and everything to the left of that picture is brand new. It was only built sort of less than 10 years ago. And you will find that most colleges are in that position. So if you want to live in old, beautiful accommodation, because again, when else do you get to do that? You can do that. If you want to live in a very modern facility that has ensuite bathrooms and whatever, probably fairly high chance that you can do that as well. So most colleges will have a mix of kinds of accommodation and a mix of kinds of facilities, and so you can choose. And if you want something that's much more up to date and 21st century, then that's absolutely available. Likewise, things like sports facilities and so on. So when you need it to be a 21st century institution, it is one. For all, quite often it looks a lot older than that. So things really to remember about Oxford is that it is what you make of it. You know, whatever you want Oxford to be when you come here, that's what it will be. And that's true, obviously, of your academic work. The more you put into that, the more that team of tutors will help you to get the best out of yourself and get the best marks that you possibly can, and understand the most you can about the subjects, and develop as a lawyer as much as you possibly can, and as a thinker as much as you possibly can. But it also applies to everything else as well. You know, if you love football or hockey or, you know, singing or whatever it is, literally whatever hobby you have, I can guarantee you that there are other people who do it while you're here, and you can join them, and you will find other people with the same interest, and you'll find an opportunity to do that thing. And again, the more you put into that, the more you'll get out of it. And in our experience, people who are really successful on the course are people who are able to balance that kind of thing. So they don't work all the time. They work, they have some other stuff that they do on the side, they can manage their lives, they have a nice balanced life, and they're just very efficient, very effective people who are good at getting stuff done in the time that they have available. And so there's lots and lots of other opportunities for you to do all those other sorts of things as well. And whatever it is that you want to do, even if it's something you haven't done before, but you think, oh, I've always really, really wanted to do this thing, I'm pretty sure that you can do that thing while you're here, and you'll find other people who will help you to do it and teach you how to do it, and you can start doing it. So there's lots of opportunities, and whatever you want to make of them, then it's up to you to do that. Law students, as I said to you before, have all sorts of nationalities and backgrounds. That actually is true of the faculty as well. You know, if you look at my colleagues in college, my permanent colleague in college is from Israel. We have people from India and Brazil and London and all sorts of things on our sort of junior lectureship team. So you will find that the faculty itself is quite diverse in terms of where people come from. Most people are not from the UK on the faculty, actually. And the same is certainly true of the student body. We have huge numbers of people from all sorts of different walks of life and all over the world. So there isn't, in that sense, such a thing as a typical Oxford student. So if you have a sort of picture in your head of a typical Oxford student, then that is really not the case. That isn't the case anymore. That said, there are two things that we do look for, and which probably everybody here does have in common, and they're sort of not immediately visible things. They're not about what people look like or where they come from, but they are the fact that everybody here has a huge amount of academic potential. That's why we picked them. And everybody here really, really loves learning, sort of for the sake of it. So if you are somebody who probably wouldn't tell everybody this, but actually learning stuff is really exciting and you really like it, and there are some subjects that you really, really enjoy, and as I say, you might not tell everybody that, but actually that does get you out of bed in the morning, then this is definitely the place for you, because that's who everybody here is. That's who we all are on the faculty. We are people who literally study the subject for the sake of it. and you will find that everybody else on your course is in the same boat typically. So those are the things that we're looking for. Do you really love learning? As I say, you might not make a big song dance about it, especially in your existing context, if that's not what the rest of your school is like. But if that's really you, if you are secretly that person who just really likes studying and really likes using your brain, then you will definitely fit in here. And if you have that academic potential, then that's the other thing that we're looking for. So everybody here does have those two things in common, but that then comes in all sorts of different sizes and packages in terms of the people who have those two features in common. And you will find that the rest of the people that you're with are a variety of different people. So how does the course work? Well, it's kind of divided into two chunks. So for the first two terms, my students at the moment in the first year are doing what we call their MODS exams, their moderations exams, and they do those exams in 3 subjects: in criminal law, in constitutional law, and in Roman law as well. And so you study those 3 subjects across the first 2 terms in different orders in different colleges. So right in October from them to Christmas, and then from Christmas to Easter, what we call Michaelmas and Hilary terms, you will study those 3 subjects, and then you will do your exams, as I say now. So they did criminal law yesterday, and they've got, I think, law today and Roman law another day. So you will do those 3 subjects and exams around now, and then you stop doing that, and then you move on to doing your final honours subjects after they come back after Easter. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, so minutes ago she was trying to sell Oxford to me as a 21st century institution, and now she's telling me that I've got to do Roman law when I arrive. That doesn't really sound the same thing. There are 2 reasons why we do continue to teach people Roman law, notwithstanding that, yes, it is the 21st century. And those 2 reasons are, number one, it is the system on which all the continental European legal systems are based, or most of them are based on Roman law. So if you want to know anything in the future about French law, or German law, or actually even Scottish law in some respects, then it's really useful to have an understanding of what's called a civilian, which is Roman legal system, as well as having an understanding of the common law legal system, which we have in England and America and Australia and New Zealand and other Commonwealth countries. So if you have a sense, all right, most of your law degree is going to be spent doing a common law system, but if you have just a little taster right at the beginning of what a civilian system is, that seed is there planted in your head somewhere. If in the future you need to know anything about those other systems, you've got a kind of building block on which you can start to build that knowledge. It's not completely alien to you because you did a little bit of it in your first year of your degree. And particularly, obviously, people who are doing course 2 and they will be studying those civilian systems alongside their English law, then obviously it's very useful for them. So it just kind of gives you that little bit of an introduction and a bit of a taster to what a civilian system looks like, which you can then store away in case you ever need it to do, you know, maybe your firm is dealing with a client who trades in France or Germany and you have to engage a little bit with their law. You've got that little bit of a basis in your head ready to take on some more information about those systems. The other thing that's quite good about Roman law is that what you're learning to do at the beginning of a law degree is figure out what law is. You know, what is it? What does it do? And Roman law is a really nice mini case study in that. It's all nice and self-contained. It's not changing. You know, we know what it is already. It's sort of there in relatively small subject, relatively little information to get to grips with. But it really shows you things like, you know, what happens if my sheep get mixed with your sheep? If we haven't got a rule to solve that, I'm going to fight you. You know, we're going to end up coming to blows about whose sheep they are. But if the law can step in and say, no, we have a system for solving that problem when 2 people's stuff gets mixed together, we have a system for solving that, then that prevents that from happening. And that's really what it is that law is about trying to do. It's about taking problems that arise in society, disputes particularly, but all sorts of problems that arise in society, and saying, can we fit a framework of rules onto those to keep everybody happy so that people don't start falling out with each other and people have got some certainty about what's going to happen and people know what's going to happen to their stuff, and then they can trade and interact and behave in their lives, trusting that there is a system and a framework that's in place there to support them and to help them if things maybe go wrong. And you'll look at things like, you know, is it the same if our sheep get mixed, for example, from if my dye is used to if my very expensive purple dye is used to dye your cloth? You know, is that a different problem from the sheep? Because you can't really take the dye back out of the cloth, whereas in theory you could potentially separate the sheep. I don't know. So that's one of the things that you'll talk about is, you know, should the same rule apply in slightly different circumstances? And so it's a really good sort of case study right at the beginning of the course in what does law do? How does law operate in a society? And you'll look at sort of what was going on historically and why it was that those rules were important. You know, which is our most valuable property and how do we have rules to protect that? The rules that we have today might be quite different, but they might not be as well. And so again, you can either compare them to our existing modern rules, or you can say, well, actually, look, they're pretty much the same as our existing modern rules because we still have the same problem. So it's quite a nice case study in what does law do, which right at the beginning of your degree is quite helpful because that's something that you're new to and not very familiar with. And one of the things that you'll learn about the law degree as I go on to talk about the rest of the subjects you do is that that's very much what we're about. We're about trying to give you a really holistic, comprehensive overview of as much of law as we possibly can, so that by the time that you leave, you really know pretty much all that you could need to know as you go out into the world. It's not completely perfect, but it's the best job we can do in 3 years in Oxford of teaching you and giving you a really good grounding in a wide variety of areas, so you know a little bit about civilian law as well as common law and so on. That then follows through very much into the subjects that you do when you come back after Easter of your first year. So when my first years come back at the end of this holiday, they will start doing subjects which they will ultimately be examined on at the end of their third year in Oxford. So they will do contract law, tort law, which is sort of negligence, wrongs, things like that, land law, jurisprudence, which is the philosophy of law, administrative law, which is things like judicial review, challenging the government, trusts law, and EU law. And then on top of that, in the final year, they do the EU law in the final year, and on top of that, they can do 2 options, and that's from a wide range of different options. So it could be things like family law, you can do advanced criminal law, you can do some more Roman law if you want to at that point, you can do some more legal philosophy at that point if you want to, you can do commercial law, company law, intellectual property law, competition law, you name it, you can do it as one of those 2 options in your final year. Now, it is only in the final year that you get those options. Up until then, you will do the same thing as everybody else at your college is doing in the same way that they're doing it. And that's one of the other things that's quite distinctive about our degree. You might well go to open days at other universities and they're saying, in your second year you get options, and in your final year you get options. We don't really do that, and that's very much about this process of trying to give you as holistic an overview of as much of law as we possibly can in 3 years. So that's very much the essence of what our course is trying to do, which is different from what some other universities try to do. That's why, for example, we have compulsory jurisprudence, which is the legal philosophy component. We want people to spend some time on their degree thinking about law and thinking about the law they've studied in all these other subjects from a sort of philosophical point of view. What are the theories behind what the rules are trying to do in the subjects they've studied? If you took one theory rather than another theory, how would that affect the rules that you've looked at in those other subjects? And so that's part of this business of getting people to think critically about the law and really analyse it and engage with it and form their own views on it. And one of the things that we do to help you with that is give you this set of philosophical tools that you can use to analyse the other areas of law that you've looked at. And so we are, again, pretty rare, I think, as a university in having compulsory legal philosophy, but that's part of why it is. It's this idea that by the time you leave, you will really have a bird's eye view of as much of the ground as you possibly can have. And then whatever you go on to do in the future, you have that sort of sense and you can always zoom in on a little bit of it and you know how it connects to everything else. For the same reason, we don't do any exams between your exams that my first years are doing at the moment and the exams that you do in summer of your third year in Oxford. There's no formal exams between those 2. And that's, again, why is that by the time you do those final exams, we want you to have an overview of everything in your head so that you can see the links between different subjects. We don't want a situation, which I have met at other universities, where you say to somebody, do you remember you studied this last year? No, did it for the exam, forgotten it, can't remember it. We want people to hold on to all the information that they get gradually over those 3, the third term of the first year, and then the 2 subsequent years, so that they've got all that information in their head together at the end, and they can see how it fits together, and they can sort of see the cross-references between it. So that's why we don't have any formal exams. You will have mock exams all the time in your college. So whenever you come back, you'll study a subject for a term, you'll go away for a vacation, you'll come back again, you'll do a mock exam in that subject. So you don't need to worry about monitoring your performance. We'll do plenty of that over the course while you're here, but they aren't big formal exams where you have to go and sit them formally and your mark counts for anything. They're just internal mock exams to see how you're getting on. The only big formal exams you do are the ones going on at the moment in your first year and the ones which happen in the summer of your final year. In terms of how we teach here, that's the other thing that's really distinctive about Oxford. So we do have lectures. This is our main lecture theatre. So all those core subjects that everybody studies, this is where the lectures happen for those subjects, because we can get, 220, 240, whatever it is, people in this room at once. Obviously, if it's an optional subject in the final year, it won't have everybody in it. It'll perhaps only have 10 people, but it'll be for everybody studying that subject. So that's what lectures are. Typically happen here or for options, one of the other rooms in the building. And the key thing for Oxford is that those are optional. So lectures here are not supposed to be like the kind of bread and butter of your course. They are like the icing on the cake, the sort of decoration, the nice to have if you want to, but you completely don't have to if they don't work for you. So that's very much the role that they play. They won't necessarily coincide with when you're studying a subject in your college. They're sort of there as an added extra if you want to go to them, if you find them useful and helpful. And that's very different, even from Cambridge, where lectures play a much more central role in the way that the course is delivered. The way we deliver the course, and the central, key component of your course here, is the tutorial system. So what happens is you get given a reading list, and you go away for a week and you do that reading list, and it probably has an essay on it, or what's called a problem question, where there's a bunch of facts and it says, what's the law that would apply to these facts? And you write up your answer to that piece of written work and you hand it in, sometimes before the tutorial, sometimes you bring it with you to the tutorial. And then, like I said before, you meet just you and typically one other person from your college or maybe from another college. The two of you sit there with the tutor for an hour and you go through that written work that you've done, and you go through the reading that you've done, and the tutor makes sure that you can understand it all, and you have a chance to ask them all the questions that you might want to ask about it, and you have that hour to sort of consolidate your knowledge. And that's the key method by which we deliver the course. So you do your own independent reading, and your independent work is really important, and then the tutor builds on that with you for that hour, and then you go away for the next week and do the same thing again with the next topic. And all our subjects are divided into 8 topics, and they happen once a week for 8 weeks. And that's the process that you go through: do the reading list, write up the piece of written work, go to the tutorial, then go away and do the week 2 reading list for the next week. You will have at least one of those a week. Some terms will be very busy and you'll have 2 of those a week. So you'll have 2 reading lists to do, 2 pieces of written work to do, 2 tutorials to do. That's quite rare. Most people have maybe 1 term of it over the course. It doesn't happen very often. The average is 1.5. So what very often happens is, for example, you do criminal law every week for your first term, and you do constitutional law in weeks 1, 3, 5 and 7, and then after the Christmas vacation you come back and you do the rest of constitutional law in weeks 2, 4, 6, 8 of the next term, alongside doing Roman law every week. So that's a much more typical pattern, where you're doing 1 subject every week for a term and half a subject every other week, and then the next term you finish off the other half of that subject every other week. And that means you're doing, some weeks you're doing 2 topics, but other weeks you're only doing 1 topic. So the state average is out at 1.5 a week, or 3 tutorials, 3 topics every 2 weeks. That's 3 essays every 2 weeks, 3 reading lists every 2 weeks. That's how it averages out over the course of your time here. Sometimes you'll have very quiet terms where you just have 1 subject. Sometimes you'll have very busy terms where you have 2. It sort of balances out overall over the course. In addition to that, you will find some tutors do classes. So I do this. So, for example, in the autumn Michaelmas term, I teach students from St Anne's and from Pembroke, and typically from one other college for criminal law. And what I do is I do a class at the beginning of the week for all those students. So that's maybe 6 students from each of those colleges. So it's about 18, 20 students in the room. And we go through all the basics of that topic. And I make sure everybody's understood the basics of that topic. Then they go away and they do their written work after the class. And then they come to the tutorial later in the week. I do it because it means if anybody's going to make any silly mistakes, we get those cleared up sooner rather than later. They don't go on to make those silly mistakes in their written work because we've already cleared those up in the class. I can be sure that people are pretty much on top of things at the beginning of the week, and then they have the confidence to go away and write their essay. And then that means also that I'm not constrained in the tutorial. I don't have to cover anything because I've done it already in the class. I can just spend that tutorial really going into detail on their written work and anything else that they perhaps want to talk about. Maybe we can do some practice exam paper questions together, that kind of thing. So it just gives me a bit more flexibility about how I use my tutorials if I know that I've already got the bulk of the work out of the way by doing a class with everybody at the beginning of the week. Not all tutors do that. Some tutors do, some tutors don't. You will find that every tutor you meet has quite a different teaching style. That's one of the nice things here, is that there's a variety of different things on offer. Some tutors will maybe do it for the really complicated topics in their subject. They'll do a couple of classes for those, but they're not for the more straightforward topics in other weeks. So you'll find that it varies tutor to tutor. When they happen, classes are, again, typically every week or every couple of weeks, and they are also compulsory like the tutorials are with that tutor. So they are different from the lectures in that respect, but you won't always have them. You can do term after term where you just have tutorials, and those tutors don't happen to do classes, and that's absolutely fine. It's entirely a matter for that tutor. And most of us over the course of the time that we've been here have figured out what works best for us and how we get the best results out of our students in that particular subject. And it will, as I say, differ tutor to tutor and subject to subject. I mentioned before that we have a thing called course 2. So we have 2 types of course that we run here. We have the plain, ordinary, just straight law course where you spend 3 years in Oxford only studying law, and that's fine. Course 2, you have the same 3 years in Oxford, but they are years 1, 2 and 4. And in year 3, you go abroad. So in your third year, you can go to France, Germany, Italy, Spain, or the Netherlands. The odd one out of those is the Netherlands. All the other subjects, all the other countries that you might go to, you have to have, you are tested in the application process for your proficiency in that language. And when you get here, you will have classes in that language and classes in the law of that country alongside your English law, English and Welsh law certificates that you're studying. So you effectively have more classes and you're studying another whole system alongside your existing one. For the Netherlands, that's not true. The Netherlands course is primarily EU law based and it's taught in English. So you don't need any language qualifications, and there's no particular preparation before you go to the Netherlands in the way that there is this preparation before you go to France or Spain, Germany or Italy. So the Netherlands is the odd one out. If you want to apply for one of those subjects, please do use the correct Ucas code. Those are the codes. If you think you might want to do that, make a note of them. They're also on the website. A lot of what I'm saying, the information is also on the faculty website. So if you miss it, you can always come back and check it there. But please do write the correct code on your Ucas form. Various things to say about the application process. If you think, but I'm really torn, I'd actually really like to go to either France or Germany, I don't know where my chances would be better, and I just want to go to one of them, I don't really mind, that's fine. Pick which is probably your top preference and put that one on your Ucas form. And then if you're invited for interview at a college, get in touch with that college and say, actually, I'd also like to be considered for Germany as well, please. That's fine. The college can arrange that. It doesn't have to be formally written down anywhere. They just need to know. So put your favourite one, put your top choice on your Ucas form, and then just make sure that the college knows what is your second choice on that topic, and they will arrange for you to be assessed for both of them, and you'll be in the competition for both of them, and that's absolutely fine. But we have to sort of do it at that informal college second stage to make that work, because there's only one space on the Ucas form. If you apply for the Law with Law Studies in Europe course, your application will also be considered for ordinary law. So in other words, it does not affect your chances of getting in. Which of the 2 courses you apply to has 0 impact on your chances of getting in. The way it works is that you are assessed for whether you can come and study law first. And a college will say, yes, we want to make this person give this person a place to come and study law. Then but actually they want to do French law. So what I now need to do as a tutor in my college is I need to put them forward to the faculty. So I say, right, I'm taking, Frida blogs for straight law, but she also wants to do French law. Can you consider her for the French law course, please? That process will then take place at faculty level after the ordinary admissions round. And then I will get a letter probably in January back from the faculty saying, actually, we've decided not to offer Frida blogs a place for French law, sorry, she's just coming to you to do plain law. Or I might get a letter back saying, yes, actually, we'd like to take her on the French law course as well. So then I know she's coming to do plain law with me, and she's having that French component added onto that as well. For that reason, every single person who applies to course 2 is asked in interview, would you be prepared to be made an offer for straight law if there isn't a place on course 2 available for you? If you're asked that question, it's not an indication of, we think that's what's going to happen. We're not, suggesting anything about your performance in interview. We literally ask it of everybody. We have to write a little note to remind ourselves on the Ucas forms. We ask this person, are they happy for straight law? And we do it for every single person applying to course 2. And that's so we have that flexibility, so that if in January the faculty says to me, no, sorry, no French law for this person, I know they're fine to just accept the place I was going to give them for straight law, and there's not going to be any problem with that because I've asked them at interview and they've said yes, that's totally fine. Obviously, if it's not totally fine, let us know, but then that might mean that we then say, oh well, we would have made you a place for straight law, but you don't want to come because we can't add the French law bit onto it, so we can have another chat about that. Most people in my experience, I don't think I've ever had anybody say no, they wouldn't be happy to be considered for straight law, which is what everybody in my experience generally does. So you will have that conversation in your interview, but don't worry about it, that's what's happening. And I say that's the order in which it happens. So the decision about whether you're coming to Oxford at all is made first as part of the cohort of everybody, and then the question is just will the faculty add a language component onto that as well, and that's a separate process which takes place after the standard admissions process. Chances of getting in on course 2 are slightly lower, but obviously it doesn't affect your chances of getting in overall. So the competition is slightly more intense for course 2 places, but those people can always come for course 1. The competition is quite as intense. What do we look for then in our application process? So when we're going through that process, how do we pick people? Well, given what I was saying before about what we will teach you and how the course works, Obviously, one of the things that we're looking for is your ability to think quickly and effectively and efficiently, your ability to be sensitive to language. Can you see the difference between foreseen and foreseeable? And can you pick up on that and go, actually, no, there's a difference between those two, I've spotted it. Are you able to be alert to language in that kind of way? Do you have a kind of analytical skill? Do you just sit there passively and absorb stuff? Or do you go, hang on a minute, is that right? I don't think that is right. That doesn't make sense to me. Let me just think this through. I think I can take that part of it and put it back together again. If you have that kind of brain, doesn't matter what it's been trained on so far or how it's been trained, that's what it is that we're looking for. Those are the innate skills that we look for, that reasoning ability. Do you have the ability to do those things? And what we're looking for is the potential. Do you have enough ability that we can then build on and really take that somewhere with you over the course of your 3 years in Oxford? Obviously, it also helps if we can see that thought process, and that means you will have to communicate that to us. I often say to people, really when you come for interview, what we'd like to do is take your brain out and have a look at it, see how your brain operates, and then give it back to you. Obviously, we can't do that. So you are going to have to tell us what your brain is doing during that interview. You're going to have to say, well, I was going to say this. I'm a little bit puzzled because actually this is occurring to me as well. So this is my thought process that I'm going through. I'm going to go with the first answer, but this is why I have doubts about it, and I can explain those to you. And then we can see that thought process working, and you can communicate that to us. That's really helpful. So we're looking for people who can reason through why they're giving the answers that they're giving and explain their reasoning to us and be coherent about that and express themselves clearly. You will find, most people find they come away, so when we get all the students who arrive in October, they go, I can't believe I got in, my interview was terrible. So no, your interview wasn't terrible, it was hard, but it wasn't terrible. And that's what you will find the interviews do, is they really stretch your brain sort of almost to the point where it hurts, where you're really having to think at the most intense level you've ever thought at. And you will eventually get to the point where you go, oh my goodness, I think my brain's actually melted. And what we're trying to do is see the point at which that happens. How far can we take you with your brain still working with us? And that will show us, how much expansion your brain can do. And that's what it is we're really looking for. So if you all turned up and we said, what's 2 + 2, and you went 4, we'd be like, well, how do we choose between them? They've all given the same answer. There's nothing to pick between them. So we have to ask you really hard questions to be able to see that thought process, to be able to see you struggle with something really difficult and see what you can do with it. So if you find that's happening in your interview, that's a good sign. It's not a bad sign. You will generally find that your interviews are really collaborative with you. Again, most people, obviously it's nerve-wracking, and we know that, and we'll try and do something at the beginning of the interview to make you laugh, or whatever it is to help you to calm down. We'll talk to you about stuff you're familiar with, like to do with your school or your subject or whatever, so that you feel on kind of secure territory to start off with, because we want you to relax a bit. And you will find that more difficult bit of the interview, where we get onto the difficult reasoning, is kind of a collaboration. The tutors will help you, they'll give you clues, they'll nudge you, so you won't feel like it's a kind of, most people come away and they say, actually, I kind of enjoyed it. It was kind of like puzzle solving, and I kind of quite enjoyed solving the puzzles, actually. And you won't find, you shouldn't find that it's a kind of scary experience or an unpleasant experience at all, because people will sit with you and they'll go, why do you think that? And you say, well, yeah, I get that, but what about this? Oh yeah, no, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, you see, because of this. And we'll just talk to you back and forth about it, and you will work the answers out with the tutors in the room. So it is nerve-wracking, but actually hopefully you should find it kind of almost fun as well. And it is just about that sort of problem solving, and we want to see how your brain works and see how all of that goes. The other big thing we're looking for on your application is your commitment to your studies. Like I said to you before, are you somebody who just loves working almost for the sake of it? Actually, you just want to do really well, you just want to know stuff, and you just want to find out stuff, and that's really exciting to you? And are you somebody who can stick with maybe the bits that you don't like quite as much as some of the other bits? Because by definition, you studied 3 subjects in your first year and then a whole bunch of other ones for your final year. There will be one of those that you like less than you like the other ones. Maybe you're a very rulesy person and you're not a big fan of the philosophy bits. Maybe you love the philosophy bits and you find the rulesy bits a little bit harder. Everybody's different, and you will find there are corners of the course that you find harder than others. How do you respond to that? Are you somebody who goes, oh, well, I'll just bin this one? Or are you somebody who goes, there must be something in this that I can get to grips with and like, there must be some aspect of this that I can relate to at some level. Let me, stick with it until I can find a way of making it work for me. And so some of our questions and some of what we're looking for in your application form and your school references and so on is that And I would say, with years of experience as a tutor, a person's attitude to their studies is at least as important a component of what marks they go on to get as their kind of innate intelligence. I've had countless experiences of people with lots of innate intelligence but the wrong attitude who don't do as well as people who maybe came in with slightly less innate ability, but my goodness, they knew what to do with it, and they've really gone on to fly beyond the people who maybe came in with more innate ability but didn't do anything very sensible with it afterwards. So I would say that's at least as big a component of what we're looking for, and most of us as tutors would rather bet on somebody who looks like they're just going to do really good, consistent, effective work and have exactly the right attitude. That person looks like a really good bet. So that is also very much something that we're looking for, and very much something that you're in control of. So that kind of concentration, enthusiasm for the subject, motivation to do really, really well, even when it gets a little bit difficult. How do we look for all of these things? How do we assess them? Well, we look at your exam results today. And it's important to say that we look at your exam results in two ways. We look at the raw scores, so how many 9s or A stars or whatever it is did you get. But we also do a thing called contextualizing the scores, which means we can get the data for your individual school and we can compare your results to your own individual school. So we might know that actually your raw scores are not that amazing, but they were absolutely the top of your school. So at your school, that was the highest mark really that was available, and you've got it. So we know that. And that means you're a top of the school person in the same way as somebody who's got, 12 A stars or, 12 9s or whatever it is that they've got. You would then be on a par with that person because relative to your own schools, you have both performed at the absolute top of your school. So we do look at raw scores, but we also look and we prioritise our contextual assessment of those scores. So it's very much your sort of usually GCSEs, but your sort of post-16 qualifications that we look at, because those are the ones that we have for people that are coming in on the Ucas scores. We will also look at your teachers' references. Those are very useful because, first of all, they'll tell us that stuff about motivation and dedication to studies and concentration and enthusiasm. They will tell us, what kind of a learner you are and have you got that really important component of your attitude to your studies that we're looking for. They will also, we hope, if you've had any particular challenges which maybe derailed your GCSEs in some way, you were very sick or a family member was very sick or something happened to you during your GCSEs. I know things have happened to everybody over the last 2 years, but if there's something particular that you want us to know about that, please do get your tutors and your teachers to write that in your reference to us, and then we will know and we'll be able to take that into account, and we'll say, well, look, yes, their GCSEs are this, but actually that's not a fair representation because of this stuff that's in the teacher's reference, and that's very much something that we will pick up on when we see your application form. We will look at your personal statements. I'll say a little bit more about this in a minute. They are actually less important in Oxford than they are elsewhere, but I'll talk more about that in a minute. We will also look at your LNAT results, and that's the other really important component of your test. So we will look at what you got on the LNAT. And then the LNAT and your typical GCSEs post-16 qualifications, those are the two data points we use most in terms of shortlisting. So that will be how we decide whether to invite you for interview. When you come for interview, the interview then turns out, it looks like in our data, to play a huge role in who is accepted after that. So the interview does play a really important part, it turns out, in the way that admission tutors at colleges make decisions about who's going to come. Personal statement, as I say, these are much less important to us than they are to other universities. If you come for interview, we will have effectively at least one, probably two 25-minute walking, talking personal statements with you. So the point of a personal statement is for us to know who you are. Well, we'll know who you are because we'll sit and chat with you for the best part of half an hour. So actually the personal statement is much less important to us than it is to a lot of other universities. So if you've been to one of these talks at Warwick or Manchester and they've said, we want to see these 4 things in your personal statement, do that. They need it more than we do because they don't have the luxury of interviewing you the way that we do. So really, don't worry about us when you're writing your personal statement, really. If you want to talk to us about your reading or your experience or your interests, you can explain, if you want to, how they show that you have the skills for a law degree. But really, there is no formula. So if anybody tries to tell you, or worse still, sell you a formula or anything else to do with your personal statement, run a mile and do not touch it with a barge pole, because there isn't one. I am telling you absolutely categorically, there is no kind of magic formula or magic way that you can write your personal statement. It's not really a component of what we look at, particularly in assessing you. It's just a means of knowing as much as we can about you, and as I say, for us that's much less important because we'll know about you when we get to meet you and talk to you for a little bit. The only two things I would say that I ever look at a personal statement for are the last two things on the slide. Firstly, is this person doing something else with their time? And it doesn't matter what that is. You do not have to be an Olympic level athlete or, you know, playing 14 instruments at concert level. You really, really don't. We just want to know that you do something else. It might be that you have a job working for a local retailer, or it might be that you work in your family business, or it might be that you have significant caring responsibilities for a sibling or a parent or something like that. We just want to know, this is somebody who does not spend their entire time doing schoolwork. It worries me if I see an application which goes, well, I work really, really, really hard and I'm absolutely at the top of my capacity with my schoolwork, because I think, well, university's a whole jump ahead of that. If you're absolutely at your capacity at the moment, I worry about your ability to make that big jump. What I'm looking for is somebody who goes, I'm doing my schoolwork, but it's fine. I'm kind of ready for a bigger challenge now. I've got space in my life and my brain to do something a bit more than this. And doing something else alongside your schoolwork, whatever that thing is, shows me that you've got that. You can do your schoolwork, but you can do it in a relatively minimal amount of time and balance it against some other stuff. And it's really not stretching you as much as you like to be stretched. That's a really good sign. And as I say, whatever else it is that you're balancing it with really doesn't matter. I can see that you're doing that balancing. It also tells me this is somebody who can manage their time. When you come here, those individual tutorials where you do your own individual study, those are really important, and your ability to take charge of your own studies and manage your own timetable. Am I going to go to lectures? Am I not? You know, what am I going to read? How am I going to do that? You won't see people, you know, from one tube to the next necessarily. You might have a class, but you might not. You are going to be in charge of your own work. So somebody who says, I'm in charge of my own schoolwork, I'm also holding down a job, or I'm, you know, looking after this person, I've got other responsibilities and other commitments. I keep those commitments. I keep my schoolwork commitments. I'm, you know, quite mature and grown up and organised and in charge of my life. That's a really good sign as well. So that's the other thing that I'm looking for other activities for, not because I care at all about what those activities are, but I want to know they exist so your schoolwork isn't killing you. And I want to know that you can balance your schoolwork against those, keep those commitments, organise your diary, keep on top of stuff, be an efficient person. Those are the only things that I'm interested in. And as I say, you can show me that with anything, any other activity that you spend your time doing at all. The other thing I look for in personal statements, like with the teacher's references, is any problems that you may have had, anything particular that has affected your performance so far that means that your LNAT or your GCSEs are not a fair representation of your ability, and we shouldn't just use them as metrics the way that we otherwise would. So please do make sure that we know about anything like that and that your teachers reinforce that in their reference as well. We will take it into account if we know about it, but we can't do that if we don't know about it. Really important to say that the Ucas form deadline is the 15th of October. That's pretty much non-negotiable. I hate these really firm rules, but they are there, and we can't really consider you unless you get your application in by then, so please do. We constantly review our standard offer, so we're always looking at the data, but at the moment, those are our standard offers, so 3As at A-level, AIB in advanced hires, 38 in IB. As I say, we keep those under review. We know that they're a little bit behind what the universities ask for. We will think about whether we want to increase them. There are pros and cons of doing that. So we'll keep those under review, but at the moment, that's what they are. If you are doing a qualification which is not covered on that slide, we have a big table of equivalences, and we can look it up and we can tell you what the equivalent would be. I will not be able to do that off the top of my head, but if you email us as the faculty, either me or Emma, we will be able to find that, or just admissions. Generally, the admissions email inbox, we will be able to answer that question for you. So if you don't see your qualifications reflected there, we are interested in them. We just haven't put everything in the world on the slide. LNAT, I mentioned before, you probably know this has 42 multiple choice questions based on 12 passages, and you spend 95 minutes doing that. You then have to write a short essay, 600 or 700 words, which takes 40 minutes. It's not very long essay, we can't really say very much. Again, if somebody tries to tell you that they've got the secret sauce to doing the LNAT, they are lying, because there isn't one. Really, the only thing that you can do is to go on their website and look at some past papers. That's really the only way that you can even think of preparing for it. It's not supposed to be something that you can really prepare for. The whole point of it is to test people's basic abilities at things like reading comprehension and writing. So if you're somebody who just generally is quite good at those things, you will be fine. And there isn't any special preparation that you can do for it. So have a look at the LNAT website. Do be familiar with that. Have a look at some past papers and have a go at them, see what it feels like. Also familiarise yourself with the test. I don't know if this is still the case, but it certainly used to be the case that once you'd clicked through from multiple choice to essay, you couldn't go back again. If you discovered that for the first time in your actual formal test, that would be a bit alarming. So just, be aware of how the system works and be familiar with any quirks like that it may have. And then that means when you do it on the day, all of that's already familiar and you're not worried about it. So I would say be familiar with the logistics of it and spend some time on LDC's website, but I wouldn't say there was anything else very much helpful that you can find to do. You will need to take the LNAT between the 1st of September and 15th of October. The 15th of October, again, is the absolute deadline for your doing the LNAT. That means you have to book with enough time that they still have before the 15th of October slots available without your having to travel to the other end of the country to do them. My advice for that would be that you book as soon as you possibly can. You can't book too early, right? That's the mistake you can't make. So do that. Book as early as you can. Book on the 1st of August if you can. Realistically, you are going to have to book at least a month in advance if you're going to get a date that's on or before the 15th of October. But as I say, there's nothing to be lost by booking early. It's in the diary then, you know when it's coming, you know it's going to be done in plenty of time for the 15th of October, and you get it out of the way. All of these are good things. So make sure that you're ahead of the game as much as you can be, and then you're not going to be up against it. If you don't do your LNET in time, if you don't get your application in on time, you may be wonderful, but we can't take you. So you've really got to make sure that you hit those deadlines. Other things to know, we are involved in running the test and setting the questions. Your essay will be seen by us during the admissions process, and the essay is designed to test, well, both the questions and the essay are designed to test those things that I was talking about before. It's another piece of data we have that will test those things, which are the important skills that I mentioned before: reading, reasoning, and communication. We have 8 applications per place for law, so there is a lot of competition to get an interview. If you are invited for an interview, though, your odds then immediately go up, because instead of being 1 to 8, they are then 2.5 to 1. So we invite for interview 2.5 times the number of people we can give places to. So 1 to 2.5 is a much better ratio. So at that point, your chances are much greater. All interviews take place over the course of a week in December. As I said to you before, you will almost certainly get 2 interviews at one college at the beginning of the week, but then more than 50% of the applicants we have will get a second set of interviews at another college later on in the week. So be prepared for that. And that is part of that business I talked to you about before, where we shuffle people as much as possible around the different colleges to make sure that we've seen everybody across Oxford and we're taking the top slice of people somewhere, and we'll find them a college afterwards. So be prepared to have up to 4 interviews, seems quite likely. If you want to see how an interview works, you could see one on our undergraduate admissions page on the faculty's website. You can watch that just to have an idea, but honestly, it's not really something that you can prepare for. And again, be very sceptical of people who tell you that they can particularly sell you the way to prepare for that, because it's really not the case. You don't have to know any law before you come. We know some of you are doing law A-level, others aren't. We will deliberately take you onto something that you haven't done, even if you're doing A-level law, because we want to see how everybody deals with some raw material that they've never met in their lives before. So we will make everybody do that, whether you're doing law or not. So you certainly don't need to know anything. As I say, what we're looking for is that stuff that I talked about before. Can you be logical? Can you reason? Can you just use your common sense to go, no, those things aren't the same, are they? Hang on a minute, why aren't they the same? Let me see if I can articulate that. And then you do a reasonable job of articulating it. It's just problem solving using your common sense, really. And that's what it is we're looking for. Can you use language well to describe your thought process and explain the sort of distinctions that you're making? Can we understand that from what you said? Not really prepare very much. If you are somebody who is interested in law, hopefully anyway, you find it quite interesting when there's a thing in the news about the Supreme Court having done something. Presumably that is of interest to you if you're thinking about a law degree anyway. So I would hope that regardless of your university entry, you'd be interested in just knowing what happened. So that's quite nice. Sometimes people might talk to you about it, unlikely. If you are somebody who is used to analysing stuff, that's really good. So whatever it is, when you debate stuff with your friends, or you talk about, what's on the news or what's going on in social media, if you have the sort of brain who goes, hang on a minute, I don't think that's right. That doesn't make any sense to me. There's a flaw in what you're saying. If you are used anyway to questioning what you hear at school or in the press or whatever it is, that's also a good thing, to get into the habit of questioning things and taking them apart and putting them back together again, whatever they are. So that's quite useful. But there isn't really a way that you can prepare beyond those things, which are basically about being an intelligent, engaged person in the world, really. So we are, last thing, and the last of truth is that it is really good that you are here. I've done a little bit to try to dispel some of the myths that I think are out there, or some of the things that are sometimes in people's brains. I don't know what all of those are. If there is something else which is bothering you and which you are worried about, there's a Q&A now, or you can always contact me afterwards. And being here is really important, because I would much prefer that you made your mind up on the basis of the actual evidence from actual people who are really here that we can tell you, than on the basis of what somebody else somewhere else has told you they think might be the case. Come and talk to us directly, and particularly do that if there's something which you feel is maybe putting you off applying. Come and talk to us about it, and we can talk to you about whether that's really something you need to worry about or not. And my guess is the chances will be not. So you're going to see some colleges later and have a chance to look at those. There's also, especially after the last 2 years, but anyway, a wealth of information on the internet. So when you go back, you can have a wander around the different websites of the different colleges and the faculty and find out more about us there. And as I say, if there's any questions that arise from any of that after you've gone back, you can always email me or Emma, or just the faculty admissions generally, and we will end up answering that. So please do that. Don't suffer in silence or have a question in silence. Please get in touch with us, and I'm sure your colleges will say the same thing to you when you go there and see them. Okay, so any questions that anybody has after all that? And don't be afraid of asking them, because my guess is that somebody else will be wanting to ask them too. Yes, hello at the back.
Well, in terms of like traveling abroad, studying, like for example, French law, would you have to do like an A-level?
Typically people do, yes. So to be accepted onto course 2, you will have an interview in that language as well. So alongside your law interviews in the college, you'll also have a language interview at the language centre. That's why the college needs to know if you want to be considered for 1 or 2 of the courses abroad, because they'll fix you up with language interviews in whichever languages those are. I say doing an A-level, of course, if you're a native speaker of that, if one of your parents speaks it, you speak it at home, you may well not be doing an A-level in it, and that's absolutely fine. It's just having that level of fluency. That is one of the things that they will test. And again, that can vary based on the competition for the subject. So, if there's not much competition for law with, I know, Spanish law in a particular year, they might be less fussed about the level of language qualification. Whereas if there's dozens of people wanting to do law with French law, they can obviously ask for a little bit more in the way of language competence as a way of choosing people. So it sort of varies. But yes, typically people are doing an A-level in the language, or are a native speaker for some other reason of that language if they apply for those. And I say not the Netherlands. The Netherlands is the one that's not true of. You can go and study abroad there just in English, and you don't need another language. Yes.
On that note, if you are a native speaker wanting to, and you do the A-level in your own language, would you be would that hinder your application?
I think it wouldn't, and part of the reason for that is because usually it wouldn't just be a language that you would be doing that. There would be a literature component or a current affairs component or whatever. There would be something else that you wouldn't know just innately, having known it at the age of 3, that would be in that qualification. So assuming that that's the case, then no, we wouldn't necessarily discriminate against you on that basis. Yeah.
Is there a different process of rejecting people if they're going for school?
If they're going for what, sorry? There may be, actually. That would be something that would be worth talking to people about specifically. And yes, that might mean if you were going for a choral award at a particular college and they wanted to take you for that choral award at that college, that might be one of the reasons why you would in fact stay put. When other people are being jiggled around, that might be a reason why they would choose to keep you. There's some colleges, there's a sort of phase in the process where colleges can choose whether to hold on to an applicant or put them back into the pool and say, just send me whatever there is. Most colleges do the latter because, that's less risky. You'll get somebody, they'll be good. It doesn't really matter if you don't have a particular attachment to somebody, one person's the same as the next, but that would be a reason why you would have an attachment to somebody and you would say, no, I want to hold on to this one and have them here. So, yeah. Yes.
For the year board course, when would the language assessment be like?
So for the year abroad course, the language assessment is done at the same time basically as the interviews. So you have your interviews for law and with your Oxford tutors, but you also have an interview which is set up at roughly the same or similar time in the same week at the language which the language centre organises. So the college that's interviewing you will arrange for the language centre also to interview you during that interview period. It'll typically be at the first half of the week, and then if you go on to have further law interviews later, that doesn't matter. You've done your language interview already. Yes.
Would you think that it matters whether you do like 3 A-levels or 3 PQ or 4 A-levels?
So we look for 3 A levels and 3 A's, and so we don't look formally at EPQs. They might be something that you would talk about in your interview. You know, if you've done an interesting EPQ and your interviewer is genuinely interested in that, they might say, "Oh, that's, you know, talk to me about that. That sounds fun." And we do talk to people a bit about their schoolwork, as I say, at the beginning of interviews to sort of settle people down a bit and get them on something familiar. So you might talk about it then, but it doesn't play any formal part in the admissions process, nor does your 4th A level, as long as you get 3 A's. So it's really kind of a bet for you as to whether you're better putting all your eggs in 3 baskets and really having the time to focus on those and make sure that you get at least 3 A's in those, or are you better spreading your bets a little bit and, you know, trying 4 of them on the basis that 3 of them ought to turn out as A's, but then again, you have to take more time to do 4. So that's really very much a question for you and your teachers, I think. We want you to get 3 A's. And whether you do that by focusing on 3 and getting them, or focusing on 4 and having, you know, more options available to get them from, you know, that's really a question for you and your teachers, really. But we certainly wouldn't ever ask you for more than 3. Yes, in the middle.
Can you vary it the law course?
So you can. In certain circumstances, we know people have to. So typically people from Singapore have to do military service, and the way that it works, they just have to apply, and we know that we have to keep places open for them. If you're sort of doing it outside of some kind of formal scheme like that, it is very hard to persuade a college not just to admit you this year against the people they've seen, but to admit you next year against the people they haven't even seen yet. You have to be super, super, super amazing for them to say, in any year I've ever seen, this person would be somebody I would have admitted. So it's much more likely, and what you will find again is if you apply to do that, you will be asked at interview, would you be prepared to be given an offer for the next academic year? And you may find that that's what happens. And I would say it's much more likely that that is what will happen, but just for that reason, that colleges will say to themselves, well, she's definitely one of the best people this year. Not sure she's one of the best people that I've ever seen, but they might. So, you know, depending on what they think of your application, they might. Yes, next to you.
How long should your personal statement have to be?
As long as it fits into the space, it really doesn't matter. As I say, we're not looking for anything particular from it, really, other than, as I say, can you do some other stuff alongside your schoolwork and balance it and be organised? And is there anything that you need us to know about? You know, I suppose the other thing that I'm sometimes looking for, though again more at interview, is just, are you yourself committed to doing law? It can be quite hard work. It's one of the harder work degrees that we do here, I think. And so I worry sometimes if I get the impression that maybe this was somebody's parents' or teacher's idea and it's not really what they very much themselves want to do. So something that shows me that, you know, but as say at interview, that would be a thing we'd talk to you about anyway, whether or not it was in your personal statement. Yes, at the back.
In terms of like how you like ranking priorities on your application, how high up would you say that LNAT is in terms of if you get like a slightly under average result?
So what we do is we know what the average LNAT is, not just across the board, but also by what we call band. So we divide people into socio-economic bands based on things like Polar and Acorn data, which is progression to university and socio-economic kind of context in that particular geographical region. And we know what we have a sort of curve of LNAT results for each of those bands. So we know where you are on that curve relative to your own band. In terms of what we give weight to at the moment, we treat things pretty equally. So the 2 halves of the LNAT and your contextualised post-16, typically GCSE qualifications, are the things that we give pretty much equal weight to. What we do is follow our data all the time. And if we think that it makes sense to treat our data slightly differently and rank our metrics slightly differently, then we adjust that, you know, year to year as we go on so that we can make the most accurate decisions we can. And everything is a 2-part process. So we have the kind of data metrics, which is quite a kind of calculated maths type point to the process, but we also have the human input. So all those applications are also read by people who are going, yeah, but this person's metrics are not fair because, you know, they were really ill when they did GCSEs, or yeah, but you shouldn't take this into account, or well, I know this person's metrics across the board are like this, but my goodness, they've got the best raw scores we've ever seen, you know. So then in those circumstances, we do kind of make exceptions. So it's very much a 2-stage process. There is a kind of formal metrics, this is how we do it, and it's quite mathematical and we have a formula, but then there's a very sort of human element on top of that as well to make sure that that's a good way of doing things. Yes.
With the interviews for the language as well as the law, would that interview be in that language, or would it be?
Yeah, exactly. You won't have to know anything about the law of that country, but it'll just be a general sort of interview, but in that language. So, you know, they might talk to you, I don't know, about current affairs or your hobbies or whatever it is. But yes, it's to assess your fluency in that language that they're doing. Yeah.
To what extent will playing a sport at a county or national level impact your application?
It won't Other than what I was saying before, so obviously if you're doing something at that level, that's a significant commitment. It means it's taking some of your time, so your schoolwork is obviously not all you're capable of doing, which is a good sign, and you're presumably having to organise yourself and balance yourself and be able to turn up to things on time and still get your schoolwork done, and that's obviously a good thing as well. So those two factors are very much the things that we're looking for. But that would also be true if you were, if you had a significant responsibility in a local retailer, or in your family business, or you had a caring responsibility as well. So it's not the kind of county level sportness of it that is interesting. It's gosh, that's a significant commitment which this person is managing to balance and still get their schoolwork done. That's what it is that we'd be impressed with, I think. Yes.
And when you say doing activities, could that be societies at school and volunteering as well?
Yeah, exactly. Anything that you can think of, really. And people do. We get applications from people who are figure skaters and musicians and work in their family business and do all sorts of things. Yeah.
You mentioned earlier on that the application process sort of how people are these cultures change.
Yeah.
There's a strength factor. Would you mind just explaining what the original system was?
Yeah, absolutely. So the original system was that you applied to a college and the college chose some people at shortlisting, and then everybody didn't shortlist went into a sort of bigger pool, and the top slice of that not shortlisted to begin with people came back out again, and you got some other people added to your list. And for most colleges, that was it then. That was your selection list. You had the people you'd chosen to begin with, plus a few people who'd been sent back to you by the faculty on the basis that they really should get an interview somewhere. And so at Pembroke, for 6 places, that 25 people-ish, 30 people-ish, that would be my interview list. Now, there was always the option on the Friday mornings. It used to be typically Wednesday, Thursday, Friday with the interviews. And there always used to be the option on the Friday morning to go searching around for some other people to interview, which actually at Pembroke we did. We wanted to know that our 25 wasn't a kind of, weird cross-section of the pool, and that, we wanted to know what else was out there. So we did do that. I think there were maybe 3 colleges that used to go fishing on the Friday morning. There was not more than that. So what you had the risk of was the problem that, College A was rejecting better people than College B was taking, because all their lists were sliced off like this and they couldn't see what the other colleges were doing. So the people falling off the bottom of that list were actually better than some of the people making it in on that list, which was obviously daft. So this was why it was that we did the process that we did of saying, no, this is hopeless. We need to reform it and we need to move people around so that we don't have these kind of stagnated pools. We have a free flow of people across the faculty, and that's what we have now. So yeah, so that's how it's changed. And when we say strength of applicant pool, for the first round of interviews, we typically mean on the paperwork, so the LNAT and the GCSE results. That's how we mean strength of applicant pool the first time round, and we make sure that's pretty even across the colleges. So we haven't got one college interviewing all the best people and another college interviewing all the bottom of the list. They're spread across the colleges for the first round of interviews. Then the second round of interviews, we re-rank everybody using those metrics plus a tiny bit of their interview score. We know the interview scores are not always uniform, so we use a tiny bit of those, but we do a re-rank in the middle of the process using the GCSEs and LNATs and their interview scores so far a tiny bit, and that re-ranks them, and then that we then spread them out as evenly as we can again the second time round. So again, we send the strong people out to a variety of different places so that everybody's getting as fair a chance as we can get them basically across the system. I'll just see if there's I don't think there's anybody else going you.
On the subject of colleges, do they look at whether you're sporty or aren't changing different colleges?
No, I don't think they really do. So it's nice, and you do quite often get a situation where if a college is really well known for something, people who really love that thing will want to apply there because they'll want to be there. So you do get that sort of happening, but it's not going to have any impact on the tutors. It's basically what I was saying before. They want to know you're doing something, but they won't care at all what that thing is, and it'll be different year to year. Yeah.
The scholarships have an impact on your advice.
It depends, actually. So if you've already, the chances are if you're already being considered for some kind of university scholarship, then yes, that would be something. I'd have to talk to you about the specific scholarship that it was. This is similar to the question that somebody was asking me about music scholarships. It probably does make a slight difference to the college that you're being interviewed at or how exactly that it works, but that will be to do with the timing of them. So it's probably better that I sort of talk to you about it specifically. I don't know off the top of my head the details of specific ones, but we could, I could look at that with you if we talked afterwards. So by all means, catch me afterwards and we can do that. Yes.
Does Oxford offer conversion courses in law, so say issue English and then converts to law? And if so, do you recommend?
So, not really, sort of. What we do is a thing called the second BA. So we we very firmly do not believe in the 1 year conversion if what you want is to be a really good lawyer. I'm personally a little bit more open-minded about this, in the sense that I think there are some types of law where you really benefit from a law degree. And so if you're working, for example, as a litigation barrister in general private law, it's quite helpful to have quite a deep and broad understanding of private law as a whole, which you would struggle to get. You could, but you'd have to do a lot of your own reading around a sort of 1 year conversion course. If you want to be a patent lawyer, what you really need to understand is the product that you're patenting. So you really need to do biotechnology for 3 years and then do a bit of law on top, because the law you need is much less in that field than the technology. So it very much depends, I think, on what sort of lawyer you want to be. If you want to do narrow transactions or patenting, do another subject first. If you want to be a sort of more generalist litigator, you probably need a grounding in the whole of law. So I'm a little bit more open-minded. As a faculty as a whole, though, we're not a big fan of doing the whole of law in 1 year. What we do let you do is do the whole of law in 2 years if you've already got a degree in something else, and that's our second BA. So we have a few places, some colleges, not all colleges take people for this, but we do at Pembroke. And we typically have 1 or maybe 2 people a year who are studying the second BA, which is that. It's the downside to it is that it is literally what I've just said. We would like in the long run to reform it and make it different. But at the moment, it is basically the 3 year degree squashed into 2 years. So if you think the 3 year degree is intense, my goodness, the 2 year degree is intense. To be fair, you've done a degree already by that point. You know how to do university exams. You've lived away from home before. You know, there's all sorts of things you've got going for you, but it's a very intense course. So yes, you can do it, and people do it. And it's much, much better than only doing a year of law would be, because you get a full Oxford law degree, but it is very intense to do it. So that would be the one downside. Yeah.
Coming back to the hobbies and extra responsibilities, would having a 6-month position?
That would be great, because that's exactly that kind of thing. It shows that you can do something else, and that's a responsibility you can keep and hold alongside your work, and that's really good. Yeah. Yeah, you.
Given our GCSEs will calculate typically that so you put in contextual.
That's the really good thing about our contextualisation, is that it's school specific. So on the basis that each school, whatever they're doing relative to each other, they're all doing the same thing within the school. That means we know where you are in that school. And that's actually the most important thing. And that means that our contextualisation is actually particularly good after the last couple of years of centre assessed grades. It's actually particularly valuable for that. It's good in a normal year, but it's particularly valuable because it means that, it doesn't matter whether your school is operating on a scale of, 1 to 10 or 15 to 20. We know that 20 is the top or 10 is the top, and we can balance those and say that's basically the same thing. So they might be at different points on the raw spectrum, but we can rebalance them and say, well, this person's the top of this school and this person's the top of that school, so those are effectively equivalent, and it doesn't matter where they started off on the raw spectrum. So that's one of the real advantages of what we do. Yeah.
Do pre-existing scholarships put you at a more favoured position or not?
In terms of schools, not particularly, other than that, it's obviously a factor. If it's another thing that if your school says, this person's always been the top of all of these subjects, we'll know from our contextualisation whether that's true, but it's another piece of evidence that might be true. So yes, it's helpful if we know, this is something that tends to mean this person is at the top of their existing school. That's always a good thing. Yeah. I didn't ask if there was any Slido stuff coming through. I should have done that. Is there anything? No. Everybody's quite aligned. Okay, one more, and then I think I've got to hand you back to Emma after that. But yes, go. Yes, you. Oh, hang on. All right, Tubi. I'll do the lady behind, and then I'll do the gentleman in front.
How does the being honest qualification differ from an LLB, which basically is up there? And how does that?
Yeah, good question. I should probably have said that in my slides. It doesn't really, is the answer. So it literally doesn't in terms of your qualification as a lawyer. They count absolutely equally. It is effectively the same. It's mainly a historical difference that we call ours a different name. The only slight real difference is that we have compulsory jurisprudence, and it is true that most of the time you're here, you will be taught to think about what the law should be, not just what the law is, and you will find most of the subjects have that sort of slightly philosophical, theoretical element to them. We'll teach you what the law is, but we'll also teach you to say, well, is that right? Is that what the law should be? And I suppose there's that element to it which sort of relates to the name, but by and large, pretty much nothing. It doesn't make much difference at all. Yes, gentleman in front.
Would the way in which, would the number of A-levels that, let's say you're doing 4 A-levels, does that change the way in which you look at the application?
No, it doesn't at all. As I say, we want you to be able to be predicted 3As and to get 3As. And it's a question for you and your teachers, really, how you're best off, what's your best bet for achieving that, really. So what's your best strategy? And that's really something that they can advise you on. Your teachers can, depending on the particular subjects and how you're doing in them, and, whatever, that they will be able to advise you on that. We don't mind, as long as you are predicted and get 3As, we don't mind particularly how you've gone about doing that. All right, so any other questions you do have, by all means, do email Emma or me or admissions and Law generally after the event, and we'll be able to answer for you.
Few little things, key dates that you need to note, and Rebecca's already said the main date is the 15th of October. So for your Ucas application, it has a time limit as well. So it's the 15th of October at 6 p.m. and Ucas system is very clever, and as soon as it goes past 6 o'clock, so 6:01, it gets marked up as late, and then there's a communication between the university and Ucas as if you want to take that late application, and it usually has to have a very good reason as for why it was late, even though it was only 6 minutes, because you've all had the same amount of time to submit your Ucas application. So 6 o'clock for the Ucas. And again, I just put the dates up there for your LNAT registration. And I'll just stress again what Rebecca said. As soon as registration opens, try and book your LNAT, because that way you'll get a test that's in the right place for you. You won't have to travel, because if you come to me at October the 10th and say, I can't find any LNAT dates available near me, I'll say, well, there's one in Scotland, you can go there. If you want to take the LNAT test, then it's up to you to make the booking yourself. It's up to you to kind of take the initiative, make sure you get the LNAT done on time. And I know that for other universities, it's a lot later date, that's fine. But for us, you will need to have taken it by the 15th of October. Another problem with the LNAT is that sometimes you'll have sat your LNAT before you submit your Ucas application. So you won't have a Ucas PID. And with LNAT, they allow you to put in all zeros. So I would really appreciate if you do just put in all zeros rather than an old Ucas if you have one, or Ucas that you're not quite sure is the right one, because the changing, when we get the information, us trying to link it up is quite hard if you've got many different Ucas IDs there. Also, when you do make your account for LNAT, you're allowed to select what university you want to receive your information, and that means that I then have access your Pearson information, and I can get your multiple choice information and your essay. Without you ticking that box, I can't gain access to your LNAT. So even if you took it on the 15th of October, if you didn't tick the box, I have no way to access that. And then it's a load of emails back and forth of us trying to figure out, why didn't we get your LNAT? What went wrong? Was it our mistake? Was it your mistake? And you just rather not be in that position, really. Once you've got your LNAT done and all the stress, then it should just be over. If you have any like special requirements, like you need a larger screen, or you need a room by yourself for whatever reason, you won't be able to book online. So just kind of bear that in mind. You'll need to actually go through the Pearson website and contact them with your details. There's a form that you can fill in to get the special requirements, and then they can go on and book you a place that has all those special requirements for you. And another thing, if you have anything that happens to you, like on the day of the test or in the lead up to the test, you get very sick. Obviously, in the past few years, we've had COVID requests. That just let me know. As soon as you can let me know, then at least I have evidence that there was some kind of special circumstances that happened, and I can put that forward to the selection committee to say this person may not have had the best LNAT because they broke their leg on the day of the test or something like that. The more information you can give me, the better. And I think that's it for lunch.
It is my very great pleasure to get the next half hour of your lives. There is no change, so you're going to have a hard time if you don't enjoy this. But we're going to talk about criminal law. You should all have, hopefully, a handout. Does anybody not have a handout? Okay, so we've got 4 people on there, and he swoops, and you'll have one in a moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through some core areas of criminal law in half an hour. Now, there's a number of things about this that are somewhat artificial. We're going to do each area for only 3 minutes. So it's going to be quick. But the main point is I'm going to try and show you in the half hour I have how interesting and complex law can be. Occasionally I hear, particularly from a teacher who wants you to do their subject and not this, that law can be dry and dull. Please tell me at the end how you feel about law, how dry and dull you think it is. No, I don't need to record it. So we've got 3 minutes. So I'm going to set a timer for each one. We're going to start at the top of the handout for physical elements. Now, crimes can be many different kinds of things. We often group them into those crimes which are achieved by your conduct, things you do, by the results, things you achieve, and very, very occasionally by states of affairs, things that just exist as a state of affairs, like immigration, being present in a country. That's not really about doing anything, and it's not really about achieving anything. But for those crimes where we talk about achieving things, and sometimes for those crimes where we talk about conduct, we very much focus on what you do, not what you fail to do. So at any one moment, there are millions of things I am not doing, right? Right now, I am not skipping, I'm not singing, I'm not feeding someone who would otherwise die. How much should the criminal law pay attention to what I don't do as a way to generate liability, or how much should it focus on what I actually do? So one way of thinking about this is, it's a huge infringement on my autonomy, my ability to be an independent living creature, if I'm obliged to do one thing. So if I'm liable for not doing X, I'm obliged to do that one thing. Whereas if you say there's lots of things that I can do and then there's just a few things I can't do, it doesn't infringe on my autonomy that much. Right now, I am not stabbing any of you. You know, that infringes on my ability to do what I want, what I might do. But there's plenty of other things I can do with my time. Yeah. So omissions can be very difficult because they infringe, omissions liability, they infringe on our ability to lead the life we might want to lead more than liability for acts. But there are some occasions where we would all probably say you should be liable if you fail to do something. Can anybody think of an example of something where, well, actually, yeah, you didn't do something you should have done and you'll be liable for the consequence? Straight up with a hand, yes.
I'm going to say someone's life and give the ability to conduct to do so.
Okay, so that's a great example. Failing to, I can only take one, sorry, maybe later. Failing to save somebody's life when you have the ability and time or something like that to do so. Yeah, actually, that's not a crime in this country. I can walk on by while you're drowning in an inch of water and do nothing, and I'm not criminally liable. Unless you were my godson. Sort of, maybe, but certainly if you were my son, right, or daughter, or et cetera, et cetera. So a parental relationship is an easy example, right? Or if I'm a police officer or a lifeguard and it's a swimming pool, there are certain situations we might think would trigger it. Well, the first case on the handout, and you notice that all of these cases have the link underneath where you can look them all up. Some of them, warning, a couple of these will be quite difficult and unpleasant fact scenarios. I'll give you further warning about those in a moment. In Miller, a homeless man enters into a house, lays down on a mattress with a cigarette in his hand, a lit cigarette in his hand, and falls asleep. He wakes up a little while later, and he notices that the mattress is smoldering. Oh, okay, I'm going to have to run over a little bit for this one. And he then gets up, moves to a different room, and goes back to sleep. He wakes up a second time, and the house is on fire, and he gets out. He must have, as far as we can tell, set fire to the mattress while asleep. He didn't do it while conscious. Should you be liable for those things that your body does while you're asleep? Probably not. At least that's the position we take. So should he be liable because he created the dangerous situation and then became aware of it and didn't stop it? He could have, when he first woke up, tried to get some help, put out the fire, phoned the fire brigade, whatever it was. So this is my first question to you, and I believe you all understand Slido, that glorious, wonderful thing. The poll should be asking you yes or no. Yes, he should be liable because he acted or omitted in a way the criminal law triggers, or no, he should not be liable. No, this doesn't count. I care about what you think to the extent that I will see you as a number on a spreadsheet. So please vote. Let your opinion be expressed. Hello. Okay, we've got to move on. So far, just about everybody has said, yes, you should be liable. Let's move on. The simple question was there about emissions liability, and you all thought yes. It's a dangerous thing, though, because in a sense, should you be liable if while you're on a train, you fall asleep, you spill a cup on the person next to you? Should you be criminally liable for criminally damaging their clothes if when you woke up, you didn't immediately try to reduce the stain? It could impact on your lives, particularly if you get bored on trains. So we're going to turn to number 2. The mental elements intention is the one I'm going to talk about. I'm going to press start. So once you're talking about fault, which is basically describing what the person has done as blameworthy or as wrong, there's lots of different kinds of fault we could talk about. The most serious of which is probably it was your purpose to do the prohibited conduct or achieve the prohibited result. It was my purpose to kill. Right? We would say that's probably the most serious way I can be connected, the most culpable thing I could do in respect of the death. But what does intention mean, do you think? What is it to say someone has that as their purpose? So I'll give you an example from the case of Woolin. A man loves his baby, but is somewhat sleep deprived and is making a mistake. The baby won't stop crying, and he throws the baby down. It is pretty much accepted that he didn't have as his purpose to kill the child. He didn't want to kill his child. He wasn't thinking clearly about what the effect of throwing a young baby down would be. What do you think about a test for intention which says you might not have it as your purpose, but if you foresaw that consequence as being virtually certain, then the jury can say that is the same as having it as your purpose? Think that through for a moment. It's not about what you have as your purpose. It's not about what you want in very layman's terms, but somehow you foresee that as virtually certain and you carry on anyway. So imagine your world, simple example, you're at a fairground, there's a target, you're trying to throw something at it, and you think it's virtually certain you won't hit the bullseye. Would you accept somebody saying to you, it's your purpose not to hit the bullseye? Do you think that's true? I mean, I'm assuming that you were all similarly talented at hitting bullseyes to me. You're probably more impressive. But let's just assume for the moment that you're very, very, very unlikely to hit the bullseye. Does that mean you would accept someone saying it was your purpose when you hit something else to say, well, that was virtually certain you intended it? And that's the question for you. That was the case of Woolin. Please vote yes for saying virtual foresight of a virtual certainty. You think that should be equivalent to a purpose, and no, or it should not be. So we've got 52%, excuse me, out of 86 people who voted, which is not quite everybody, who say it should not be. But you can see this is really close. Actually, the law says a bit of a fudge. It says the jury can decide that you foreseeing it as virtually certain when it was virtually certain is intention, but they don't have to. They could say, yeah, you foresaw it as virtually certain, it was virtually certain, but we decide on these facts, it is not intention. Or they could say, we think it is. So we don't even define this absolutely crucial idea. We leave it to a jury. So a jury in London one day might decide one thing, the next day something else. A jury in a different part of the country might decide something different. So we now need to move on to homicide, and we're going to talk about manslaughter very briefly. Manslaughter, a lesser form of homicide. So murder, the one we've already mentioned, our most serious form. Then there are a number of reasons why it might not be as serious as murder, and so we will call it manslaughter. One example, you have what we call a partial defense. So you intend to kill or cause serious bodily harm, but for some reason it should be less, typically because of diminished responsibility or loss of self-control. We also have a class of manslaughters where you weren't trying to kill, you weren't intending to kill or cause grievous bodily harm, but somebody died. So unlawful act manslaughter or gross negligence manslaughter. We call those involuntary because you weren't trying to kill. I want to focus on just one of these for a moment, which is a form of voluntary manslaughter called loss of self-control. You can see on the sheet that I've put down sections 54 to 56 of the Coroners and Justice Act 2009. Those give the provisions, and the link is down on the sheet for you. Now, the simple idea is if you were provoked to lose your self-control and it was because of a qualifying trigger, then the jury may grant you this defense. And in which case you won't be convicted of murder, you'll be convicted of manslaughter. Provoked, lots of things could do that. Qualifying trigger, well, it's supposed to be that you feared immediate violence or you had a justifiable sense of being seriously wronged. And then a reasonable person of the same age and sex in the same circumstances might have done the same thing. What not would necessarily have, but might have done. So it's not about just getting angry easily, because if you just get angry easily, you probably won't pass the second test, the qualifying trigger, but you almost certainly won't pass the third test, that a reasonable person, same age and sex, etc., might have done the same thing. The bit that I want to highlight to you is going to feature the word sex, but I'm not going to talk about that in much detail, simply sexual infidelity. There's a particular provision in section 55(6)(c) which says sexual infidelity cannot be a qualifying trigger. So the sort of simple argument goes, one person comes home, finds somebody who is under some sort of bond of sexual fidelity, breaking that bond. Simple example, not a necessary one, is a spouse comes home and finds the partner having sex with someone else. If you fly into a rage at that point and kill, you won't get the benefit of loss of self-control if that's the only qualifying trigger. It's just ineligible. And there's three things I want to highlight here. One, do we all agree what sexual infidelity is? Obviously, one might say amongst a married couple who are supposed to be monogamous, that's an easy example. What about a couple who aren't married? Well, clearly the marriage shouldn't make a difference. It's not in the act. What's the next step? What about where you've never actually had sex together before, you're under an agreement, you won't until you get married or until a certain number of years have passed, and then one of you has sex with somebody else? What about not actually sex? What about just a really enthusiastic amount of snogging? Is that relating to sex? Well, the rest of the law would say, yes, the law would say yes. Snogging is just kissing. 2 15-year-olds kissing is a sexual offense in this country. So there was a very shocked look somebody turned to somebody else to give in this room right now, and I don't want to talk about it, but it was quite entertaining. That is the law, unfortunately. So just snogging could be a form of sexual infidelity. Now, of course, the lower the type of infidelity, the less likely it is you'll meet the third stage, the reason a person the same age and sex might have done the same thing. But could it include, to give you an easy example, I've got a mate up there called John. John and I abide by the bro code. And that means, of course, that John and I cannot go out with the other's exes. What if John does go out with my ex and I fly into a rage? I've never been in a relationship like that with John, other than... So as a consequence, could you say I have a bond of sexual fidelity with him? Yes. But as a consequence, if that's the only qualifying trigger, if that is sexual infidelity, it's ineligible. So the first question was, what is sexual infidelity? Is it obvious? The Act doesn't define it. Second point, why is this the one thing that juries are not qualified to decide on? They can decide on everything else. Just apparently, normal people, average lay people, cannot understand what sexual infidelity is and gauge it appropriately. Is that right? And the third thing is, do you think it's really easy to separate out sexual infidelity from other facts? So the examples I've just given you are only about sexual infidelity. But what if John had also done this by breaking into my house? And I could be enraged that he broke into my house. But the jury would have to somehow either not be told about the sexual infidelity component of that to decide the qualifying trigger, or be told about it to explain why it was why he wanted to do it in my house, but then be told to disregard it for working out the qualifying trigger, bless you. That's very difficult. So I'm not trying to say whether this rule is right or wrong. What I'm trying to do is think about it. How would this actually work, and what are its theoretical implications? We have to move on, though. Right, number 4, sexual offences. Again, I'm not talking about the sexual detail of this. I'm just going to highlight one particular offence under Section 3 of the SOA, Sexual Offences Act 2003, which is sexual assault. Now, I don't want to talk about the detail, just one thing, touching. It is required that you touch, right? That is the definition of the offence. It has other components, sexual, without consent. I'm not talking about those now. I just want to think about the idea of touching. I think we would all probably agree that if this was somebody else's arm and this is one arm and you touch, that's touching, right? I'm still got a couple of blank looks in the audience. I'm hoping this is where we start, where it's comfortable. Okay, right. And we would also agree, I think, that grabbing somebody's shirt, that would be touching them. Even though it's not skin to skin, it's nonetheless touching something closely connected to their body, right? And you would probably also assume that if I get a stick and I prod somebody, you would say that was touching, I reckon? No? What do you think the next step is? Oh, a bag is a further step from clothing. Yeah, absolutely. No, totally it is. And then you could go another step, which is, well, what if I'm no longer holding this and I throw it like that? Is that touching? Starting to get tricksy, eh? Well, would you believe that we would have to have CCTV evidence to show whether to prosecute somebody for this offence, I was doing that or doing that? Would you think the law was making a massive amount of sense? Well, that is something you might want to think about, but I want to take this even further. Whatever your position is there, let's imagine I have a fan. Nobody want to admit they're a fan? Okay, just wait till you know me better, honestly. So I take a fan blowing out cold air and I point this at somebody so they feel the cold air. is that touching under what you think the act should mean? No shaking of heads, voting with Slido. We've got 87 people. There's like at least 20 people in this room who are like, I is so cool, I do not need to vote on Slido. The cool kids sit down front and the cool kids vote on Slido. I haven't voted on Slido. Oh, now you have. Okay. So, oh no, the timing's about to end out. Wait for it. Okay, let's move on. No, almost everybody has said no. Isn't that interesting? Would you be happier if it was water? If I took a hose and was spraying water at you? Somebody said yes too loudly just at that point. If you were being sprayed water at you, does that count as touching? Interesting. Interesting. Well, we don't actually have a case that decides this. But for myself, I wouldn't find it a huge stretch to say I'm controlling air in the same way that I'd be controlling water. And it shouldn't matter that the air is not a solid thing like a pen or a stick. But we haven't decided this yet. So this is, you know, maybe by the time you guys, if you want to get law degrees and are in courts, you might be deciding this case. You want to decide this case now?
And I was just going to say that you want direct questions with the pen, if you throw out pen
So you want to prosecute the pen? I do follow what you're saying, and it's a question of how direct it has to be. I don't think one can just go direct and indirect. If this is some sense indirect, isn't it? I'm not actually touching them as a body, and their shirt can't be assaulted. So there's always going to be things that you don't like my shirt. What is that? I chose this one especially, thinking you guys would like the block colours. Oh, you guys, this read it. Anyway, the point is there's always some amount of indirectness or directness, and then it's a question of how far you want to go. I think we probably all agree that these things are incremental, right? It's not like there's just an obvious, just no. You could see how it's a scale. Anyway, we've got to move on to inchoate offences. This is a bit more conceptual for you. Have you ever heard of the offence of conspiracy? Yeah? Sorry, would you mind either giving me your name or a fake name that you would like to use for today? The person who just spoke.
Me.
Yes.
Me.
Neve. Splendid. And could you give me your name as well, please? Oh, a fake name that you're happy for this term.
Yaish.
Yaish. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Yaish. Okay. So we've got Neve and Naish. So if I say to Naish, Yaish. I did check. Okay, Yaish. If I say to Yaish, I really don't like the way Neve answered that question. Let's kill her. Because at a moment you were like, oh, he didn't like the way she answered it. It was setting up a. It's not real, people. It's a hypothetical. It really is. So, and he says, yes, let's absolutely do that. Bam, criminal liability for the two of us. Nothing else has happened. What if it's even worse, though, and we agree, look, in 30 years, when she's huge and successful, let's kill her. Or if she earns £1 million, let's kill her. And he says, yeah, great idea. It's a crime immediately then. Now, can you tell me why? Because what you might want to say is it makes it more likely it's going to happen when two people, especially two very capable people like us, agree that something should happen. But is it meaningfully closer when it's supposed to happen in 30 years or when it's supposed to happen when Neve earns £1 million? I'm going to keep moving around. You were your first, but just to spread the love. Yes, you're making me awkward like I shouldn't be loving you. I do, and everything about you. Please answer.
I think that in the sense that you planned it, so you have like the idea of actually committing that crime. So whether it's like murder or sexually assaulting, that still counts as your planning. Whether that's 30 years or not, that's still like you have that intention of doing so.
I'm with you. Right now, I have many plans in my life. I'm not going to share them with you, but I have many plans, big plans. Am I liable simply for having a plan? I could have a plan to kill Emma. So you're going to need something else, or you should, or do you think it's just sufficient that because you have a plan, you should be liable for it? There might be questions of proof, but is merely contemplating or thinking about doing a crime enough? And I agree with you. You might say that is, but actually I find that a very invasive way. I mean, I could change my mind. But even if you want to hold that line, effectively you're saying you don't have to do anything towards a crime ever, even an agreement. isn't even necessary. But even if you say agreement is necessary, why should that be close enough? Anyway, I can't answer this for you, simply to say we do have this rule. It's under Section 1 of the Criminal Law Act 1977. If you agree to a course of conduct which, if carried out according to your intentions, would necessarily amount to a crime, you're liable. That's the law in this country. So don't agree with people. Wait, no, that's a very negative way to look at the world. Don't agree with people to commit crimes. Also, ideally, don't plan to commit crimes, but let's not go into the detail right now. So I now want to turn to secondary participation. This is a huge topic. It's also a topic I'm personally involved in, so I probably should constrain myself. But the core question here is, when should you be liable for somebody else's crime? Notice, in the conspiracy, it was both of our crimes together equally. But in complicity, we're saying, I'm your accomplice, I'm your accessory. Easy example. Let's assume for a moment that one of you in the room wants to commit a murder, and we all know it. And so while you go out to the toilet, we all file out the other way, and everyone in this room has left a knife on the table. Right? So that person comes in, finds the knives, and goes, yes, I needed a knife, I've got one. Is that enough to make us liable when that person commits murder? Yeah, are you volunteering a name?
Oh, no.
Okay. I want to answer your question. I'm interested in it, but I also want a name.
Should I give my name?
Any name.
What, Nicholas?
Nicholas. So Nicholas is the killer, everybody, just to be absolutely clear. But Nicholas also has a question.
Would it be accessory after the fact? Like if he does go on and murder someone?
So thank you for owning it. That's very kind of you. But if you think about it, after the fact is the accessory contributing after the events, whereas we've contributed before the events. So possible, but in this case, that's not the way we conceive of it. Anyway, I'm not going to use Slido just now, but simply to say, is that enough? Actually, our law says yes. It doesn't matter that you didn't communicate. It doesn't matter that there were 100 other knives Nicholas could have taken. You meaningfully contributed even that much. But what about you knowing that he was going to do it? Is it enough that you know he's going to, but you don't want him to? You just don't care enough? Or should you have to intend that he commit this crime? Should it be enough that you merely foresee it's possible he'll commit the crime? So let's shift the scenario. Nicholas goes into a shop and he asks the man with the knives in the shop. He says, I'd like to buy a knife, please. Now let's say, because the way he does that the shopkeeper is a bit suspicious about what he wants the knife for. Shopkeeper says, what kind of knife would you like? Well, it's got to be able to have it's got to have a good weight to it. And the shopkeeper gets quite suspicious. The shopkeeper doesn't intend for him to kill. Maybe perhaps doesn't even believe it's definitely going to happen, but he's suspicious. He might even foresee it as possible. Should that be enough culpability to connect the shopkeeper to Nicholas's crime? I'd love to take questions. I genuinely would, or answers. I'm just raising those two questions. When have you done enough? What have you contributed? And also, when do you have enough fault? That's an underlying question. Now, whatever your answer there is, the references I've given you are particularly to two cases. One Supreme Court case the first there's a report by the Justice Select Committee of Parliament. And then the second is a Supreme Court case in 2015, which gives the new rules. And then there's a Court of Appeal decision in 2016 applying them. I was somewhat involved in the Supreme Court decision, so I don't really want to talk about it lots, but simply to say this, whatever you decide about me, for instance, and Nicholas, now let's take it one step further and go, should it be easier to convict you of a second crime after you commit a first? And the scenario would be, sorry, Nicholas, Nicholas and I are going to commit a robbery. Can I have a volunteer to be a security guard? Nothing good is going to happen to you. Yeah. Janavi.
Yeah.
Janavi is the security guard. Now, I don't know if you've met Nicholas already, but he is a very strong, powerful, slightly angry man. And I know, though, I tell him, don't be too aggressive. We don't want any excessive violence. Yes, you can bring a gun if you really absolutely have to, but don't use it only to frighten. Of course, Nicholas goes off on one and kills Janavi. Now, in that scenario, have I contributed to him killing her? No, I told him not to. But I foresaw it as possible that he might, because I know how angry he is. Should I be liable for that murder as well as the robbery? If it was the thing I was directly helping, like the robbery, I'd actually have to contribute to it and be at fault for it. Did I contribute to his killing the security guard? No. And the only fault I had was that I foresaw it was possible. Well, until 2016, 2015, that was the rule, that you were liable for that second crime without having contributed to it and only having foreseen it was possible. Somehow, by committing one crime, you changed your normative position and you were now some kind of outlaw, and you could be liable for any related crimes merely by foreseeing they were possible. If this hand up is, that's a terrible rule, I'm going to agree with you.
Kind of. It's not like how you have to help someone if they're drowning in France.
French do have a good Samaritan or duty of easy rescue, which was, I think, part of the example we had earlier.
That's kind of contradictory to how you don't have to help someone.
It is contradictory. There are some complications to it. But yes, we don't have the position of connecting to other people. You're connecting to other people in a different way. Anyway, the case of Jogi removed that rule, and it's now no longer easier to convict you of a second crime merely because you commit a first. You might think that's wrong. You might think that's not how we should respond to group violence. Anyway, definitely have to move on. Mental capacity defenses. Kingston is another horrible case, so only read that if you're really prepared for some nasty facts. But the underlying issue for it, right, the underlying issue is, when should you be liable when you're intoxicated? So one simple conceptual question is, say you do something and your friend does the same thing while drunk. Should it be the same difficulty in convicting both of you? Should it be easier to convict the drunken person? Or should it be harder to convict the drunken person? Think about that. Do you think there's an easy answer?
It depends on the level of intoxication.
Well, let's assume that there was enough intoxication, not so much that you couldn't think rationally at all, because that normally means you're in a pile on the floor and not doing anything. And let's assume that it was enough to cognitively affect you. But should it be easier to convict you merely because you were drunk? Or this person, easier because that person's drunk? That's the question. I'm not going to do it on Slido because it's a 3-option version. I don't want to get into it. But our current law says it's easier to convict you because you were intoxicated. But one of the funny quirks about this is, what if you were involuntarily intoxicated? What if it wasn't you who was drinking? Somebody spiked your drink. Somebody gave you a drug which you didn't know about. And what if that drug was a deep disinhibitor? That's to say, it stopped your ability to stop yourself. So you might have wanted to do this thing. You spent most of your life wanting to do it, but you've always stopped yourself because you thought it was wrong. And then somebody gives you, knowing that you wanted to do this, gives you a very strong disinhibiting drug, and then presents you with an opportunity to do the thing that you wanted to do. Do you think that person should be liable? So the question I'm eventually asking you for a Slido purpose is, if you are involuntarily intoxicated, should you still be liable for intentional conduct? Yes or no? Ramping up. We've got 70 so far, and 82% are saying no. Only just under 20% saying yes. In fact, the law says yes. You are liable, because it simply asks the question, did you have that intention in your mind? It doesn't ask whether it would only be given effect because you were disinhibited. I personally don't like this rule, but it is the law of the country. We've got to move on. I timed that. Oh, come on. I timed that one well, right? Right, just a little bit. So we're now going to talk about general defenses, and this is our last two things. I'll make this one short. In English law, we recognize self-defense. If you commit what would otherwise be a crime to defend yourself, so long as you perceive a threat and you use force that's proportionate to to the perception of a threat you have, you're not liable for it. Somebody comes at me with a knife shouting, "Die, Dyson, die," one of my many admirers, and I use force in response, nimbly breaking 3 fingers and disarming the opponent because that's how cool I am, then I'm not liable for probably actual bodily harm. I don't really see grievous bodily harm for 2 broken fingers. I'm not liable. But what happens if there's a mistake on the part of the person exercising self-defense? So let's assume you're at a party to celebrate finishing 6th form, whoop, whoop, and it's a fancy dress party. Somebody is walking towards you in a costume, and you think they're attacking you with a sword. somebody from school who 4 years ago you had a bit of a run-in with, and you think they're finally going to get even with you. Got a couple of nods in the audience. You know what I mean. This person is just swinging the fake sword, but you think this person is attacking you. Can you use force against them? So my question for you again on Slido is, should the law... No, let's try this. Do you think the law permits mistaken self-defense, i.e. you're not liable because you mistakenly thought you were being attacked and used force? Notice I'm not asking if you use grossly disproportionate force. So you think someone's going to slap you around the face, so you stab them to death. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying it's a reasonable response. So the question was, just to be clear, do you think the law permits mistaken self-defense?
Are we allowed to have a qualifier with that? Like, like our answer? Or is it?
I mean, Slido doesn't permit it. You've just got to go with yes or no. There are many things we could qualify, but I think the question, do you think the law currently permits?
Oh, currently, not what we think we should.
Yeah. Sometimes I've asked you what you think should be the law, and sometimes I've asked you what you think it is the law. This time I'm just focusing on what you think the law is. Do you think that's sufficient to reach to try to avoid some of the qualifiers you could enter into? So people have voted and it's very tight, 90 people, and it's basically 48-52. No one would want to make a very firm decision with huge consequences lasting decades on the basis of a 48-52 decision, would they? Well, luckily, I will tell you everything you need to know. The really complicated answer is that, oh no. The law does permit mistaken self-defense. Now, you might have a debate about whether it should, because then someone who is actually not actually attacking you, who is in a sense innocent, you're permitted to use force against. There's also, since you're a really good audience, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question here. Let's say that you want to use force against a third party in order to protect yourself against the aggressor. Now, this is a true aggressor scenario. Right? So you're at your friend's house, your mortal enemy, who you know is going to try and attack you, right? Try and beat you to a pulp. This person is at the door banging to get in. Your friend doesn't realize that there's this much danger. So you try to explain it and your friend goes, oh no, that won't be that bad, and goes to open the door. Can you, for instance, hold your friend back? Could you tie your friend up to stop them opening the door? Why do people get excited about tying their friends up? Okay, awkward. Should you be able to use force against that third party in order to protect yourself? Because that third party is not attacking you, but might be the reason why that person could get in. Or even worse, push somebody in the way of an attacker, someone who's not even connected to you. Those are tricky questions the law has to face as well. Okay, well, we should move on to our last example, which is property offences. So I don't want to go into the detail of theft with you. It's very complicated. Can we just roll with me when I say it's defined? Theft Act 1968, Section 1.1 says, if you dishonestly appropriate property belonging to another, intending to permanently deprive the other of it, then you're guilty of an offence. Dishonestly, we can talk about, but I think it intuitively makes some sense to us. Property, yeah, sure. Dishonestly appropriate. Well, let's just say act as owner over it. And in the example I'm about to give you, it'll be obvious that there's an appropriation, at least a taking. Property, fine. Belonging to somebody else, I think we can probably handle that. And intending permanently to deprive probably won't come up in the scenario I've used. That's the definition. Now, Hinks was a very nasty case, a very tricky and difficult case, but it boils down to this. Can there be an appropriation where you have the owner's consent? I'll run it through for you. See, this is why you wanted to sit at the front. This is why you wanted to sit at the front. Oh, I got a smile. Excellent. What was your name? Maria. So Maria says that she would like £10 for something acceptable. A cake. That's good faith. I actually know Maria. She's awesome. She doesn't want it for the cake. She wants it for something not really acceptable, but not hideously illegal. He's giving you suggestions. That is a dent on the shoulder right there. Okay, I No, not that one, because that's actually illegal. Learning a lot about you people very quickly. Let's say that you want to go to clubbing, whereas I know you've got to study. Okay, so going clubbing or, okay, I know she wants to go clubbing, right? But would you agree she's been dishonest with me? What, with the lying? Yeah, okay. Lying to get money? Yeah, sure. But Maria is amazing, and I want to give her the £10 even though she's lied to me. So if I reach out and start giving her the £10, I would be transferring by my consent the £10 to her, correctly? Sorry, correct. So if she touches it and takes hold of it, she would normally be appropriating it. Can she appropriate it with my consent? People are shaking their heads. That means you can have the £10, apparently. But the thing is, if you're wrong, she's going to be committing a crime. And what's worse, I might even be an accomplice to her crime because I provided the thing that let her do it, and I might even intend her to carry on. The law's slightly difficult on that point, and that's why I can't give you the £10, because I wouldn't want to turn you into a thief, Maria. In fact, Hinks says you can appropriate with the consent of the owner. So even though somebody is giving that to you voluntarily, if you're dishonest, you would be committing an offence of theft. Now, I would have to challenge Maria and say, do you really want this for cake? And if she said, no, I want to go clubbing, then if I give it to her, she wouldn't be committing a crime. So I couldn't do all of the questions I asked you by slide, and there wasn't the time. But hopefully what I've done is walk you through 9 key places in the criminal law. Now, do you remember the lesson or question I asked you at the beginning? Does this stuff sound dull to you? No. In the £10. I could see the £10 elicited a lot of positive response. Now, I can't do everything I'd like to do. It's already well past our time. It's already just 20 past 2, and you've got another session at 2:30. What I just want to capture is, it's been a great pleasure to get to talk to you. Thank you for your attention and engagement. When you think about what you want to do next, get the information you can. It's great you've come on an open day and you're exploring this place. There are many great degrees. There are many great courses in life which don't involve degrees. Even if you end up doing a law degree, there are many great law degrees. Oxford has a very special place in legal education in this country. It'll be a great place to be. But fundamentally, whatever you do in the rest of your lives, please be people who pay attention to the kinds of things people are making rules about you for. Why are they making the rules that guide your lives? And are they good rules? Because when you disengage, they get to do what they want. The only other tip I'd give you is, if you're not in it, you can't win it. Quite literally, if you don't apply, we cannot give you a place. So if it looks like you could make our offer, if you think you're competitive, if you don't mind working pretty hard, then apply to wherever universities you're interested in and let us decide. Don't rule yourself out because you're afraid or because you think maybe I won't get it. Tiny bit of life advice, if you don't mind me being really tedious. Try to be the person who goes through life risking things for what they want. They risk not winning because it's something they want. If you're one of those people who thinks, well, I might not get it, therefore I shouldn't even try, and that's an emotional response we all have, then you end up perhaps not getting the opportunities that you could have. So let us worry about trying to do the incredibly difficult task about picking between you. Give us the applications for anything, not just law at Oxford, just in general. Anyway, I'm going to go up to the top. You've got about a 10-minute break, I think, and I will be outside in case I can answer any of your questions, but we've only got 10 minutes. Thank you ever so much for your time.
Okay, so Clifford Chance with us today, and most virtually, they're all just been here in person, but unfortunately things have happened with their scheduling. But we've got Asha, who's going to talk about graduate trainee schemes that they have at Clifford Chance, and also Emma is going to join us as well and talk about her whole career, which I found really interesting yesterday, and I told a few to say about it as well. So Emma, did you want to go first?
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for inviting us. I'm sorry we can't be there in person, but great to be live streaming in the Gulbenkian. Takes me back a long time to my student days. So we'll do a quick introduction and then I'll tell you a little bit about the firm. And then the idea of this session is to enable you to ask questions, because I know people don't necessarily understand what's involved in working in a city law firm. So we're here to answer any questions you have. So my name's Emma Matabalavu. I have been with Clifford Chance now for 22 years. years. I studied at University College in Oxford. I read law with French law. So I spent my third year studying in Paris, had a wonderful time, would highly recommend it to you all. And then following a vacation scheme I did during one of the summer holidays at Clifford Chance, I joined the firm as a trainee back in 1999. And the way that the firm works, it's a global firm, was one of the first firms actually to be sort of truly international, global firm and a real pioneer in that area. And that really appealed to me as a student, especially when I was studying abroad. I joined the training contract, which is basically a 2-year training contract, which is made up of 4 what we call seats of 6 months. So as you're training, you're sitting with a qualified lawyer who will be your supervisor. So it's a sort of mentoring relationship. You are working and learning at the same time, and you get the opportunity to work in 4 different departments. In my case, those span from the corporate team. I did a securitization seat. I worked in project finance, and I was lucky enough to spend 6 months in our Rome office. So one of the great things about the firm is that with our global network, we have English law capacity around the globe, as well as increasingly US law capacity around the globe, as those are probably the 2 main international legal systems that we see in the sort of financial and corporate contracts that we're involved in. And then I qualified into the securitization team as it was. So following on from that, I worked as an associate. I completed a client secondment, and then I became a partner in 2008. And we can come on to that a bit later, because the world changed a great deal in 2007, 2008. I was also a graduate recruitment partner for a long time, so looking after our relationship with Oxford. So great to be here today. And I now manage one of our teams, which is our financial markets team here in London. So that's my very potted history. Asha, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. So my name's Asha Tiku, and I'm one of the graduate recruitment managers here at Clifford Chance. I've been with the firm for 11 years. And as Emma mentioned, I look after the whole process of identifying talent and bringing them through all our work experience opportunities, our upskilling opportunities. And I work with the team to look after our application process, our assessment process, and bringing that new talent into our firm through either the training contract or via one of our schemes. So I'm best placed really to answer any questions you've got about joining the firm, what the expectations are, what the process looks like, and I can also answer sort of more of the broader questions as well. So yeah, that's me.
Great, thanks, Asha. So just to give you all a little bit more of a sense, you may or may not have heard of Clifford Chance. So as I mentioned, we are a leading global law firm, and we effectively practice where our clients, who are a real mix of corporates, financial institutions such as banks and insurance companies, and financial investors, so the likes of pension funds, hedge funds, private equity, and the like. So who are all investing in a broad range of economic assets. So wherever they're headquartered, which tends to be the main financial centres. So we have offices across the globe, and our main regions are London and continental Europe, the Americas, both North America, New York and Washington, and South America, and then across the Middle East and through to the Asia Pac region. So those are the kind of 4 main regions, and we work together cross-border for many of our clients who are global players in their relative industries. And we're quite unusual in that it's a truly global firm with a single profit pool, and we cover a broad range of areas. So the key practice areas are the corporate team, the financial markets team, which I sit within. So we cover all types of finance, all types of loans and derivatives and capital markets instruments, through to our litigation and dispute resolution team, and then a number of other practices which complement those, such as real estate and tax, pensions, employment, etc. So it's a very broadly based firm, and we're very, very proud of our quality. So one of the things that we care about is really the quality of the advice and the quality of the service we provide to our clients, which means we're looking for the best graduates to work in the team, people who are intellectually curious and bright and committed to helping their clients achieve their goals. so yeah, we're very, very proud to be the law firm with the most sort of tier 1 rankings in the international legal directories. So that's something that we're very focused on. So we don't have a chatability because you're all actually there in person today. So we've got lots of great questions yesterday. So maybe at that point we'll just open it up and see what people want to ask. Don't be shy, you can ask anything at all.
Yeah, sure. If you want to go to a magic circle, like Clifford Chance, what's the best way of going to apply for it?
What's the, sorry?
What's the best way of applying in order to get to the magic circles companies?
Okay. I mean, Asha, do you want to answer on the actual application, and then I can talk a little bit about what we're looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of our applications open in August for everything across the board that we offer. So in terms of application deadlines, they open in August. For training contracts, they will close in the December time. Training contracts would usually be when you're at that penultimate year law student and final year non-law student stage, looking to actually secure the training contract. We then offer our Spark scheme, which is a sort of vacation scheme opportunity for first year law students, second year law students of a 4-year course, and penultimate year non-law students. And applications for that close in the February. So open in August and close in the February. I would strongly advise anyone who's thinking about approaching that application process to visit our careers website now. I know there's a link to that on the website that Emma's put together for you. So I definitely encourage you to go on there, explore all the opportunities, dive into all the resources, and start to get a feel for what the career is all about and what we look for and how to approach our application process. We also have, as part of our widening participation offering, our Access program, which is for year 12 students and above, which also leads to a space on one of our Spark programs. So that's another opportunity for you to have a look at. And again, those deadlines are open in that sort of August to February timeframe. Yes, and the process is essentially submitting an online application. So once you've done all that research, you've understood what it takes and realised this is the right route for you, you would go onto our online portal, submit an application form, submit that to us. That then goes through a rigorous screening process. And then you're invited through to an assessment day, which consists of an interview with a partner and a senior associate and a case study exercise. I can go into a bit more detail about that later on, but essentially the process is application, a screening process, and then an assessment day, and then you would be offered an opportunity on one of those opportunities, depending on which one you have applied for, be that the training contract or the scheme, the Spark scheme. So that's how you go about it logistically. But if you have any sort of questions about specific aspects of it, I'm happy to take those as well.
What is Clifford Chance looking for in a training solicitor?
I'm sorry,
really sorry.
What is Clifford Chance looking for in a training solicitor?
What are we looking for? So it's always a little bit difficult to describe, but it's quite obvious when you see it. So we can tell fairly quickly when we're working with trainees if you have the qualities we're looking for. But very broadly, as I said at the beginning, it's an intellectually rigorous career. So we're looking for bright people with strong academics. Much of what we do is the written word. So it's really important to have strong communication skills. It's really important to be someone who enjoys reading, who enjoys assimilating a lot of information, who's able to analyze text. So, the law degree involves a lot of that. So if you have an aptitude for your law degree, that will be incredibly useful in the day-to-day that we do. So the skills required in my team, in financing real estate, which is what I do, it requires attention to detail. It requires the ability to draft documents, to make them internally consistent, to kind of pull together concepts and keep them in your head and be able to negotiate. So written and oral communication skills are really key. And I think an intellectual curiosity. So one thing is sort of understanding things intellectually and having the academic ability, and that's incredibly important. But the next phase that makes you successful in both the role as a trainee and as a lawyer, being a successful lawyer and partner, is the ability to apply your legal knowledge to structures and real life situations. So a client may come to you, as they've done with me recently. They want to do a deal in Italy. Now, Italy is a jurisdiction with many legal restrictions. It's quite a difficult jurisdiction. So they might not be able to because they don't have the right license. Then we need to discover, can they set up a vehicle with the correct license to lend in Italy? If they do that, can they sell it to the investors who they want to sell it? No, those investors are not authorized to buy in Italy. So can we put it into another structure? So there's a lot of practical, pragmatic skills required to actually work with clients, to use your legal knowledge, to find out more, and to come up with solutions that work. So what clients are looking for is not a long essay explaining to them why Italian law doesn't permit you to do the following things, but to work with your colleagues to find something that does work and then explain to them how that's going to work. So it's sort of applying your legal knowledge, being a practical, pragmatic person. And that also translates into some of the actual logistics of work. So when you're, we're not marked on essays, we're not having tutorials, we're actually getting on conference calls and signing deals. Obviously in litigation, managing large cases, which may go on for a long time and have a lot of documentation. So organizational skills are really, really important, particularly at the junior level. A lot of what you'll be doing will be helping to get a deal across the line. So I have a trainee in my team, and at the moment we're trying to sign a transaction this Friday. So some of his job is actually figuring out what we've got, what's missing, who's got that, who we need to chase. And so having very good ability to work in teams, to work with other people, to get where you need to go is really, really important. And so some of the things that to think about will come from both your studies and the extracurricular activities you're involved in. So leadership and organization skills are really important. And then the last one is the thing that brings that all together, which is that we are service providers. So in some ways we're like a, 5-star hotel or, people who make very nice kitchens. We are delivering a service to our clients, and it's really important to remember that. So this is an industry in which there's a lot of competition for clients. We operate in we charge our clients quite a lot of money, and they have therefore very high expectations of what we will deliver. And so you need to have the mindset, I think, of being very keen to deliver a client service and to help your clients achieve what they want to do. And sometimes that can be a little bit antisocial. It can involve late nights, but it is very fulfilling. And actually, our best marketing is the work that we do. So clients come back to us because of the quality of the work that we carry out for them. And that's very satisfying. So if you could put all that together, you'd be a brilliant trainee.
How many applicants apply for the training contracts?
Yeah, how many applicants apply for the training contracts?
How many applicants? Yeah, I mean, the number might scare you slightly, but I don't want that to put you off, because our processes are designed to seek out those exceptional individuals. We have seen incredible growth on our application numbers year on year. We see it going up by about 30%, but that shouldn't be a reason for you to self-select out. It's a competitive industry. We are looking for the very best. If you have what it takes and you're committed, and you've been developing all these skill sets that Emma's mentioned, and you are genuinely interested, that should not stop you from wanting to apply or putting an application in. And we offer so much guidance and support on how to position your experience, how to get the best out of the application form and get the best out of yourself in that format. So there's lots and lots of opportunity to help prepare you for that process if you're feeling sort of uncertain about it. But it is a competitive industry, and you do need to be sort of mindful and prepared for that.
I think, Asha, we take, is it 100 at the moment?
We do.
Trainees a year.
Yes.
There are 100 training contracts in London. We also offer training contracts elsewhere, like the Middle East, for example. They hire directly into Dubai.
Yeah.
And part of that Middle East training contract also rotates through London. So yeah, over 100 spots a year, but and probably we interview maybe double that, is it, Asha?
Yes, it's about a 50 ratio. Yeah. And we take 100, but that is split into 2 cohorts. So I know that some people hear that number and think, oh, I'm joining in a massive group and does that mean I get lost? Or no, you come in 2 separate intakes, a February and an August intake. So you come in as sort of groups of 50, and it's a great experience.
Yes.
As a worldwide firm, would you say that being multilingual is beneficial for the Chancellor stuff?
It's beneficial, but it's not essential, I would say. So luckily for all of us, English is the language of business for most of what we do. Obviously, if you decide to go and qualify into our Paris office, then you would need to be a French speaker. But for trainees in London, it's definitely helpful, and it's helpful with the opportunities if you would like to work in one of our other offices. Mandarin speakers, most European languages, South American languages are all in demand, but it's definitely not a requirement, but certainly helpful.
How many firms globally? So how many stations do you have?
I couldn't hear the question. Is it how many offices?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're in about 28 countries. It changes over time.
Yeah, I want to say about 20. Yeah, about 28. You're right, Emma.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, basically our footprint would be North America and the East Coast. This may all change as well. So there's always debate about whether we expand or, on the West Coast in the States, for example, Sao Paulo, and then a lot of offices in Europe. So London, we have an office in Newcastle as well. But then across continental Europe, most jurisdictions other than Scandinavia and Portugal, in Western Europe. In the Middle East, we have quite a few offices, and then we are across Asia Pac. Asia Pac operates a little bit like a region, so they do move resource around the region, but we go from 2 offices in mainland China through Hong Kong, Singapore, right down to Sydney and Perth in Australia. So and Tokyo as well. So yeah, it's probably the places you would expect there to be international business hubs. And we tend to only have offices and a presence if there's client demand in those areas. And some areas we cover from a more hub model. So we have a large Africa practice and a large South America practice, but a lot of that is fly in, fly out. So we do have an office in Morocco, but we don't have offices across the African continent, but we do have a lot of best friend relationships with law firms in Africa, and we have a lot of African specialists in places like London, Germany, and Paris. So just because we're not in a country doesn't mean we don't have quite a deep relationship and a lot of work in that jurisdiction.
We are actually 34 offices in 23 countries, but that is, as Emma said, subject
very
to change.
Inaccurate.
34 and 23.
We need to check that next time.
Yesterday you were talking about your progression through Clifford Chance and
Yes.
from beginning to end. I found it really interesting. I was wondering if you could kind of repeat the story today.
Sure, no, happy to. So I didn't really know what to expect when I joined Clifford Chance. I studied at Oxford and did the vacation scheme and took the training contract in London. But I'm from a small town in Northern Ireland. My dad's a farmer and my mum's PE teacher. So I didn't really have any background in the city. Wasn't sure what to expect, but I did actually really enjoy my training contract. I think putting the law into practice suited me really well. And I particularly enjoyed the time I spent in Rome. I was doing securitization, which you may never have heard of, but it's a way of financing receivables. So a lot of what we do, if you've watched The Big Short, you may have heard of it. Got a bad rap during the financial crisis, but basically it's allowing people to invest in things like residential mortgage debt, which is a very big asset class, and credit cards and other types of consumer debt. So I did that. I spent some time in secondment at a client when I was about 3 or 4 years qualified. And after I came back from that, I had my son. It was quite a big transition then, as a sort of, I was about 29, trying to do this very demanding job with quite long hours and a team and clients, and also try and nip out, pick my son up from daycare and get home, get him to bed, log on again in the evening. And believe me, the Wi-Fi and the systems were not as good then as they are now after 2 years of the pandemic. But when I came back from maternity leave, the partners I worked with started to encourage me to think about partnership. And I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to become a partner in May 2008. So that was a very, very interesting time, because in the first half of my career, as I said, we were very busy. Clifford Chance was one of the leading, tier 1 securitization teams in the world. And so I got to work on the best in class deals, deal of the year, we were law firm of the year, all those great things. And we were very, very busy. And then around July 2007, Bear Stearns, the US investment bank, collapsed, and deals that I was working on went on hold. And everyone started talking about this liquidity crisis, and no one really knew what that meant, but it sounded good. We kept saying, yes, there's a temporary liquidity crisis, it'll all be fine. But the liquidity crisis went on for quite a while, and then it got worse. And I, in the meantime, was pregnant with my daughter, so I went off for maternity leave in 2008 as a new partner, and came back in 2009, and my world had changed a lot. My clients, I worked a lot for people like Bank of Scotland and RBS, had almost both been nationalised, almost gone bust, and had to be bailed out by the government. And in case of Bank of Scotland, was taken over by Lloyds. And many, many, many of my clients as individuals, the people I work with in New Well, have been made redundant. So a lot of the trading floors in Canary Wharf where I work, I'm looking out today at the Lehman building, which is right across the street from our building. One of my partners, he's now a partner, but at the time he was a junior lawyer, was on a client's comment in the Lehman building. He hadn't been there for long. And, they all came into work and were told that Lehman was no more. So he didn't know what to do. So he called up his boss, Andrew, who's just sitting around the corner from me, and said, should I come back? So we have Canary Wharf is built on lots of shopping malls, which are all underground. It was built by Canadian developers, so everything's underground to protect you from snow. So Barry, instead of going out the front door and being snapped by the journalists, the front of the Lehman building, sort of came downstairs through the shopping mall and back to Clifford Chance. So that was a short end to his secondment. So a lot of things happened in 2008. The Northern Rock, we were busy doing deals with Lehman and Northern Rock at the time. So life really, really changed for us, particularly all of us finance lawyers. And it took a long time for that to change. It was a really tough time, particularly to be a new partner when you didn't have a lot of work, because the job of the partner is to win work, to bring in clients, and all the people I knew had gone and there wasn't a lot of work. So I think it was quite a formative experience. It made me a little bit tougher and gradually, with a bit of luck, a bit of, networking is always important. If you've helped people in the past, they will remember you. So all those people who had lost their jobs, many of them showed up in different organizations and became clients somewhere else. So many of the people that we knew at Lehman went to work for Elliott hedge fund and are a great client of mine now. So stick with people, help them through the hard times, and they will trust you and look after you. So that was a great lesson for me. Things got a lot better around 2013-14. In the down times, many lawyers who are transactional lawyers who are used to doing M&A transactions or financing transactions turned to restructuring. So we have a restructuring and insolvency team, and we all say during a financial crisis or a recession, we all become restructurers. And then when it's over, we go back to doing new deals and leave the small core of restructuring experts to continue. So that for me was the kind of first half of my career was all on an upward trajectory, and then it came as a new partner to an abrupt stop and required me to really reskill and reinvent myself in many ways, and that's when I became a real estate finance lawyer as well. And then of course we got to Act 3, which has been the pandemic, where it wasn't caused by banks or the financial system, it was caused by a virus, and so a very different type of crisis. And what's been really interesting for me in my managerial role and as a partner is how we look after our people. So, the big focus has been obviously the transition to working from home, which has gone really, really well. But looking after our graduates, we've got people coming in who haven't necessarily worked here before, and how do we create those bonds of friendship and mentoring? So that's been a big challenge over the last 2 years. But happily, I can hear we're having a tea and cake party at the end of the quarter to raise money for Ukraine. One of the colleagues in my team is Ukrainian, and so we're all wearing blue today and having cake. So we're back in the office, and it's actually great to meet all of our new trainees and get to know them. So that's a very brief snapshot of the highs and lows over my 20-year career.
Does anyone have any questions about that? Oh yeah, that's that.
Your workload, how would you describe it? Do you have a very long working day? Is it grueling, or is it like manageable with your social life?
Work-life balance. So I think it varies. So it can be very hard work. It can be very demanding. Interestingly, although at the beginning of the pandemic, we were quite nervous about work levels, and I thought it was going to be a return to the financial crisis that I just described. Because so much cash was pumped into the system, we've actually been incredibly busy. So in my team, the last 2 years have been incredibly busy, and we almost had more work than we could do. And, there was a flight to quality, and the phone was ringing off the hook. People worry that if you don't see clients in person, you don't go out for lunch, you don't meet them for drinks, they might forget who you are. But we were incredibly busy. Partly, I think, because the clients were also at home and had nowhere to go. So they were probably online 24/7. So it's always good when clients have other things to do other than chase their lawyers. So my team worked incredibly hard over the last couple of years. And some of that, was why we were worried about people's welfare, particularly if they were, at home without the social contact you normally get. Other times it can be more moderate, and there isn't a sort of presenteeism culture. So if you're not busy, then use that opportunity to take the time to go and see your friends and do other things. So right now, sitting here with the war in Ukraine, I don't know what it's going to be like for the next few months. The markets are very turbulent at the moment. So it is unpredictable as well. And sometimes, you think you're going to have a quiet week, and then a client phones up and they've got a very time pressured deal, and it could be all hands on deck. I tend to try to go home. Now that we're all so good at working from home, we do have a sort of agile working. So we expect people to be in the office 50% of the time, which means, some days of the week you can work from home. So that gives a bit of flexibility. And I try not to work too much at the weekends, but sometimes, as with university, you might find yourself with a deadline that means that, you're going to dedicate a couple of hours on Sunday to work. So, can be quite long hours, and I think resilience is a really important part of what we do, because it can also be stressful. So being able to manage conflicting priorities is really important, and being able to sort of have resilience within yourself, and to be able to kind of work in a team and to kind of help others is really, really important, I think. So yeah, I'm sure that's the same answer that you get in most city law firms, but it's important, I think, to be aware of what you're signing up to, because we want to find people who thrive in that environment.
What would you say is the best and most challenging part?
Best and most challenging part of the job?
I think it changes as you develop. I think when I was a junior, one of the periods I really enjoyed was as a junior lawyer when I qualified for those first 2 years, because I think that's a really steep learning curve. You're getting a lot of responsibility, you're getting to build those relationships with clients and colleagues, and you're really learning your craft, and you kind of get a real sense of satisfaction because you're kind of all over the deal. And when you finish it, you know, it's great. I really enjoyed that. I did some great deals at that stage of my career, which I still remember, because I think it's more vivid when it's your kind of first time doing it and you really take it all in. And then obviously that changes as you get more senior, because you delegate more, so you may not be doing everything by yourself, so you're going to be working with a team more. And ironically, I think at my stage, I know that I'm extremely old, one of the things I really find satisfying is actually the new partner process. So this year and last year in my team, I'm promoting to partner people who I've known since they were trainees and saw them progress, and hopefully had a little bit of involvement in mentoring and developing them into extremely successful partners, and that's really rewarding. So I think it's different stages of your career. Sometimes it's just you know, a client calls you and it's because you've done a good job on the other side of them on a deal, and they now want to work with you and instruct you. So I do still really enjoy getting called up for new deals. I find that really exciting. So yeah, a real mix, I think, but it does evolve over time.
Maybe say about the anything else.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm not quite sure where the microphone is. Where I'm going to go. There's one for the actual microphone and one for Zoom. So I was going to say, actually, do you have anything to say about the graduate training programs that you run? Anything else to add on, or do you want some more questions for that?
Oh, you're on mute, Asha.
I think I'd have learnt by now. I'm more than happy to take any questions if anyone's got any about any of the specific programs. Please go ahead.
Doesn't have any questions about the graduate programs? Yes, another. How important is your work experience in trying to apply to graduate schemes?
Work experience. I think work experience is always really, really valuable. And it doesn't have to be legal work experience. I think that's quite important. I interview a lot, and what we're looking for is people with the skills that I mentioned, and a lot of those could be developed working, you know, in retail, in McDonald's, you know, whatever it is. Working with other people, taking responsibility, so showing that kind of leadership in sort of taking responsibility for something and being able to follow it through, showing your organizational skills and collaboration skills. So I think any work experience you have is always going to be really useful in the application and the interview as well, because we're probably going to be asking you for examples of times when you've done certain things, and work experience is a good one. It is good to show some interest in the law. So if you've got legal experience, that's great. But it's more important, I think, to think through what kind of person you are, what you're looking at from your career, and why you think you'd be well suited to a career in law. So trying to get as good an understanding of the job and why you would enjoy it and why you'd be good at it is sort of more important than legal experience per se, I would say. Asha, I don't know if you've got anything to add to
Yeah,
that.
I completely agree. Of course, we ask for you to put all of that into your application form, so there's the opportunity to write about it. You are limited. You can't put endless amounts. So like Emma said, you do need to try to align the experiences that you've had, the exposure that you've had to the role that you're applying for and the competencies you think you need to exhibit. And the way you're going to get, get that knowledge is by attending sessions like today, where you hear about Emma talking about the role, but also reading all the profiles on the website and getting as close as you can to an understanding of what the job actually entails and what the expectations are of you. So align them carefully.
Do you think it matters that it's the work experience is online or in person?
Doesn't matter if the work experience is online or in person.
Well, obviously, the last couple of years, we've seen a massive transition from physical to virtual experiences. Most of the major law firms have moved their internship opportunities into an online format, as have we, in that we've developed our global virtual internships, which anyone that is thinking about a career in law should at least take a look at. So they've become really weighty with regards to sort of conveying your commitment and authentic engagement with what we do. So what people are starting to, actually have a section of their application form dedicated solely to the internships and opportunities that they've been along to. I think my advice on that is it's not about a tick box exercise, not about showing us the volume of virtual activity you've been involved with. I think it's important to talk about and write about the experiences you've had that you're happy to then expand on and talk about things you've actually taken learnings from, because it's very likely that your interviewers might want to sort of dig into that a little bit, and also you want to be able to showcase that you've taken something away from that experience. So I think showcasing it and putting it on there has become the norm, and I think it is, and they are very valuable resources, these online internships. And obviously, we are sensitive to the fact that there has not been many physical opportunities available. But I still think you would be able to carve out a successful application based on all your experiences, not just the virtual ones. And, be sure to put all of that down if you think that it's relevant.
I think just in terms of your own personal decision making, to the extent that we can now meet in person, I think you may benefit from that, just because it will help you differentiate a bit more, and I think it feels a bit more real if you get to meet people in person. And that might be at law fairs and so on as well, but not essential.
I have 2 questions. Okay, 2 questions. So I was going to say, how did you decide what you wanted to do in terms of your passion, your purpose, your career? And if you had the chance to go back to our age, would you do anything different?
Oh, good question. How did I decide to become a lawyer? So my story is not sort of one where I always grew up wanting to be a lawyer. I think it was actually suggested to me by my mother. I think I was the sort of child who was quite bookish. I read a lot, and my parents, being sort of practical farmers, didn't necessarily think that was a very useful skill. So she's like, "Oh, you better go and do something like law. You're not going to be much practical use on the farm." No, so that was that was the suggestion. I think that started it off. I think for me, I liked the sort of intellectual. It's a sort of good blend between the arts and sciences, I think, because it's got the sort of literary side that we were discussing before, and the analytical side that you might expect, but also very practical. So that sort of appealed to me, and I think the reason I decided to become a solicitor, I wasn't super keen on the role of a barrister. It seemed to me quite an individual profession. You don't work in a firm, you're sort of self-employed, and I didn't really fancy being an orator. I didn't really fancy standing up and speaking in court. So there were a number of aspects of that role that didn't really appeal to me. I'm a sports person. I did a lot of team sports as a child and at university. So I really liked the idea of being in a team and being in a global firm and being in a sort of more collaborative environment. And that just suits my personality. And then the reason I stayed is because actually, I've really enjoyed it. I've been successful, which is, it's always good when you're doing well at something and people are encouraging you and helping to develop your skills. It's never boring, because over my career, as I've hopefully managed to convey, it's evolved hugely with the economic cycle. So you get a ringside seat on what's sort of happening in the news and in the economic world and on the front page of the FT, because you're kind of there and you're seeing it happen in real time. And you have to kind of keep reinventing yourself as that goes to new clients and a whole new dynamic, particularly post-financial crisis. And would I do anything differently? It's a good question, and it's one that many law firm partners sort of asked each other whether they would encourage their kids to do this job. And I think there are mixed views. We actually do see quite a number of children of law firm partners apply and become very successful lawyers. So they're not all put off. I think there's sort of two answers. One is it's very, very demanding, and maybe you'd find something, slightly less stressful to do with your life. And the other one, which my husband always points out to me, is that it's a career that affords you fantastic opportunities. You work with really smart people. Unlike, things like medicine, there's no blood and mess. It's a very nice working environment. Generally, very, very diverse and intellectually stimulating, and you get a lot of great opportunities to travel and meet really interesting people. So I think I probably would do the same thing again. I think I probably would.
What many seats are there in the training contract?
How many seats? How many seats are there in training?
How many seats in the training contract was that?
Yes.
So we have four seats of 6 months each.
But there are opportunities for that to look a little bit different. So there is a bit of flexibility, like, for example, in litigation, you can have split seat opportunities, and you can also go on various secondments. And of course, there's the international option. But yeah, the model is built around 4, but there are many trainees who have quite a varied experience. It's about, once you're in the firm, sort of seizing the opportunities that come your way.
Can you just explain what a seat is?
What seat, sorry?
What a seat is, just in case.
A seat just means a 6-month rotation. If you think about it as rotations. So right now, this is a good time of year because our new trainees joined last week. So Monday of last week was day 1 of the new 6-month seat rotation, which means that my previous trainee who shares an office with me, he finished last week and he's moved to a new department. He's gone to construction. And my new trainee, Aitan, arrived last week and he's in his 4th seat. So previously he's done litigation, antitrust and financial regulation, and now he's sharing an office with me. So he'll be working on real estate finance and securitization for the next 6 months. But as Asha was saying, so most of the time you do that for 6 months, which is quite a good period of time because it usually allows you to learn. There's quite a lot of training. We provide a lot of foundation training. So you'll understand what's the type of work we do in that department, and you'll get involved in some deals, and hopefully you'll see some deals that go from sort of start to finish during your 6 months. And then you move on to the next one, having gained quite a lot of skills which are transferable, but then moving to a slightly different area of law. But as Asha said, a limited number of those 6 months can be split into 2. So we have some client secondments which last 3 months, and then you would do 3 months in the relevant team. But the majority are 6 months. And I think most other law firms do it that way as well. There are some exceptions, but most law firms have a structure like that over the 2 years.
Do you offer internships for people that are not at university yet?
Internships for students that aren't at university yet. So this age range you're looking at.
Yeah. So I mentioned, of course, the Access program, which is the widening participation program that we offer for year 12 and upwards. And then in addition to that, we've got the virtual opportunities. So we actually designed a virtual internship called Ready Set Law. It's a work experience program actually targeted at 16 to 18-year-olds, offering over 6 hours of modular content on there, which basically is an introduction to commercial law. So there's, in the way of a scheme and something physical, Access is what we have on offer. We do have a schools manager in the team who works on opportunities and building up opportunities at various schools. But in terms of an actual set of resources and upskilling and understanding what the role is and the expectations, there's a whole wealth of resources available to you on our careers site.
Yes. Do you get some people to take questions?
So you mean law and law? Was that what you just said? Yeah. So do you? I think actually yesterday you said the split was 60-40.
Yeah. About 60% law, 40% non-law, and that sort of, moved from 50-50 to 60-40 back to 50-50 again. So yeah, we have a very diverse workforce, and we tend to recruit a fairly even split from both demographics.
And from universities all over the UK as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How does someone who hasn't studied law work in a law firm?
How does someone who hasn't studied law work in a law firm?
How does someone who hasn't studied law? Well, so when you finish the law degree, in order to become a trainee, there's a legal practice course, and everyone has to do that. But if you haven't studied law as an undergraduate, there's a conversion course, which is shorter than a 3-year law degree. So it's a 1-year course that covers the key areas that you would need to practice as a commercial lawyer.
And there is, of course, now the new SQE program. And if you go again to our website, you'll be able to see all the details around what those conversion courses look like. And as a non-lawyer, as Emma mentioned, there's only that one additional course, which is the PGDL, for which law firms will generally tend to sponsor you, provide you with maintenance, and support you throughout that whole process.
Yep.
But can you please explain the specific courses for the SQE and the differences?
Do you know much about the SQE? Is asking about the two different tests?
Yeah, so essentially the SQE is doing what the LPC did before, but it's split into 2 parts. So it's essentially, the way to look at it is it's like your driving theory test before, actually, learning to drive the car. And it's split into 2 parts, the SQE1, which is the sort of prep part of the program, and then the SQE2, which is sort of more looking at sort of the exams, and wedged in the middle is, each firm is doing this, but wedged in the middle is a bespoke, firm program that the trainees will be part of and follow. And it's really a unique opportunity for you to understand the firm. The firm are really involved. There are sessions. You get to meet lots of lawyers, and it's really well supported and tailored and bespoke to our firm. So you come away with the skills and the learnings you need specifically for the type of work that we do. Other than that, there's no sort of massive change. I mean, obviously in the course content, I don't have all that detail with me now, but there's lots available on the SRA website about it. But also we are partnering with the University of Law on the SQE program, and you can find out a lot about what it looks like from their website as well. But essentially, in the same way that you would have done the LPC prior to starting the training contract, the timings are almost identical. It's just that it's broken into those 2 parts. The content is slightly different. And as I say, wedged in the middle is that bespoke Clifford Chance program of content.
So is it 7 months, Sasha?
Yes, about 7 months. Yeah.
Any more questions? We're going for it now.
Great. Lots of good questions.
Yeah, they're lovely this time, yeah. For joining us and taking out time of your very precious schedules. Everyone want to give them a round of applause?
Thanks, Emma. And as I mentioned yesterday, if anyone wants to email in any questions to me directly, they're more than welcome to. I know that you're going to circulate my details, so I'll be happy to hear from anyone.
Lovely to meet you all, and good luck with your studies. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We started off yesterday with a fun fact, and you don't have to do the fun fact if you don't want to, but it's a fun fact, right? Icebreakers, I hate them. So if you just start off with your name, your college, and then one interesting detail.
Okay, cool. Hi, I'm Smriti. I'm at Martin. I'm a second year. I'm not that fun, but I'm part of the Biotechnology Society. I'm part of the Anime Society and the Board Game Society. So if you have any nerdy, geeky questions, then I'm here for that as well. Fun.
I'm Ali. I'm also my second year. I'm at Morden, and I do the Law and French Law course. If you have any questions about that, feel free. Fun fact about me, I started athletics last term, so I started doing shotgun discus. So I find it quite fun. We compete against Cambridge, so it's very fun. Cool. Hi guys, I'm Rishi. I'm also a second year lawyer. I go to Morden.
fun facts about me: I'm vice president of the Modern Women's Powerlifting Society.
My name is also Smriti. I'm a second year law student at Worcester. And a fun fact about me.
Been here for a while.
Oh yeah, I'll just skip myself. I can't think of anything fun.
Hi, I'm Brian. I'm a finalist. I'm a bit older and irrelevant now. I'm at Brasenose College, and I'm trying to think of a society I've been involved in. I was on the Brasenose JCR committee last year. I was the access and admissions rep for the JCR.
Now I feel boring. So I'm in the Worcester JCR as well, and I recently worked on a theatre production. So if you have anything theatre related that you're interested in, I just about know something, so I might be able to help you.
Who wants to kick off the first question?
What is JCR?
Yes,
good question.
So the JCR is like a junior common room, and it's the undergraduate student body within colleges. So you have the general student union, but every college has its own JCR, which is basically the first to third years, and within that we kind of have like the president, treasurer, secretary, and access officers, whatever, and you kind of run the college within like the student body of the college, and you work with the college a lot to do basically anything a student union would do, but in a college is known as the JCR.
Kind of like a student council.
Yeah.
Yeah, just start them out.
How did you know that you wanted to like have that certain college? Like, how did you choose your certain college?
I can go first. I didn't know there were colleges here until I applied, and it was asking me for a college. I was like, this is news to me. And so I went on quite a random internet search, and I was like, for Merton is at the top of what is called the Norrington table, which is essentially like they rank according to academics. And I personally feel like choosing college is completely meaningless because you can get pooled very frequently. You do get pooled, and you kind of don't really know the vibe of the college until you've been there for a bit. Actually, an open day is pretty good because then you get to go and see the structures. But I'm an international student. I've never come to the country before, so it was just like a bit of a random choice, and it doesn't really matter because all the colleges are really wonderful. And once you come here, you feel like every college is the best college. But I chose it because of like a random table fact. I know people at Merton who came because we had J.R. Tolkien who taught there, and so we have a little table that he used to teach at, and so people really like that table, so they were like, why not come to this college? And people who go to Modern for Oscar Wilde, like it's just really random things. So people pick very randomly. You can also pick on faculty. I know some people who really, really were obsessed with the work of one of the tutors at a particular college, and so they were like, this is the college for me. But ultimately, wherever you find yourself, you will realize that the law faculty is pretty standardized, and you will get pretty decent quality tutors no matter where you go.
I chose Magdalen because I wanted a bigger college and quite like an old-looking one, because initially I thought St. Catherine's would be the one for me, but then I went and visited it and I didn't quite like it that much. But then I saw Magdalen and I don't know, it was really aesthetically pleasing, so I quite like that. And then also we have deer, so as soon as I saw the deer, I was like, I'm sold. I really want to go here. And also we have a lot of greenery, which I really appreciate because you can just take walks, so it's really helpful in that sense. You're correct about like some small certain random facts. So for example, at Magdalen we had Oscar Wilde as an alumnus, so people might, English students might be into that. After research, and I found out that we have quite a few law alumni. So we had Lord Denning who went there, Lord Sumption, our president right now, Diana Rose QC, she's a human rights barrister. So that's not to say that other colleges don't have law alumni, it's just, we have quite a few renowned ones. And I was like, oh, okay, that's quite interesting. So I thought I'd apply, and so I applied to Magdalen College.
I'm apparently really different. I didn't get the college that I wanted, that I applied to rather. So I applied to Brasenose, mainly because it's the only college that I've really seen a lot of. I mean, they had a law library and a ton of state school students. So I was like, yeah, winning, let's apply here. And it's central, so it was a really big thing for me. Turns out that I didn't get that. So I got pulled prior to interview, and I'm at Modern. Oddly, I love it. maybe more than I think I would have loved Brasenose, but obviously, like, I think everyone says that. That being said, I genuinely do love it, and I'm kind of glad. I think it's a random process when you get pulled, although everyone else would have told you more about that. But in my head, I'm adamant that they checked it a bit and they like moved me to a college that like was quite similar to Brasenose and that like matched up with my personal statement, which I might have made up. But I do think that for that reason, it's kind of nice to still research the colleges a bit. Try not to fall in love with one, but it is nice to sort of know something about what you're applying. I felt like open applications seem quite scary. And so when you're working out like where to apply or like how to look at a college, like come to the open days, you can Google them. There's like a website that kind of helps you compare the colleges. It's being updated right now, but then it should be quite useful. And then there's also like certain things like food, accommodation, size. Those are the main things that I was looking at with colleges. And that makes it a lot less daunting if you know what you're looking at. You're just like, okay, so how much is food? Like, where do I live? So that was all really important. So yeah, I think it is important to research it. Also, it doesn't matter that you could like love Brasenose and then get moved forward and still be happy because I'm living good.
Yeah, sorry, I'll just add in quickly that I think size and stuff is super important because I mean I was pretty lax about this, but I think for me what I realized when I was in school was I really liked small peer groups and I really liked knowing everyone in my year group, and like that really affected how I was enthusiastic about learning every day. And Merton's very small. We have like a total of 100 people that are in my year group, so you get to know people really fast. And that's something that might work for you. You might like larger groups where you have more things on like on a daily basis, and you might not want to bump into the same people every day. And so that kind of stuff is pretty important. And what I also thought was important was maybe just looking into the bursaries and things that are available, because I know Merton does these book grants and we have like special things for international students. And so it was nice to know that before I applied. And that might be something that's relevant to you, especially if you are into music and you want to be a choral scholar. You'll have different application dates, or you'll have to do things slightly differently than other people. So just to be aware of that is a good idea. But yeah, as you say, research, but don't like obsess over the college because it's about the larger university system anyway.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I applied to Worcester and I got Worcester. And the main reason I applied is I went on like a 10-minute tour kind of like today, and it was really pretty. Like that is the most ridiculous reason to apply anywhere, but I went in, it was really sunny and we had really beautiful gardens. And I was like, wow, this is the prettiest college I've been to. If I'm going to apply to Oxford, I might as well apply to the prettiest one I went to. That was kind of the logic. It's not perfect, but I was like, why not? But I also looked at the alternative prospectus, which is the website she was talking about. And I basically listed all the things I wanted. I think I wanted a kitchen. I wanted like green area, and we have like a lake in the Swan and a lot of grounds. 24-hour gym. A law library was an important one because I was like, I want to have my own space. I thought it was an option, so I was like, oh, if the law library is an option, might as well. And it kind of gave me a list, and Worcester was there, and I was like, I've been to that one. That's pretty. Let me apply that. Like it doesn't like she said, it doesn't really matter where you apply. I would say though, like if financial grants and sponsorships are important to you, the bigger colleges, the more well-known colleges tend to have more money, which is something I wish I had known. Worcester's pretty good for that, but I think that does make a big difference. So have a look at those. But even then, like there is uni-wide stuff as well. But like I went to Christchurch yesterday, and their dinner is £2.80. Like I'm still angry about this fact that I didn't know this, because that is so cheap. And like for a whole term they get to eat for like £200. That's insane. So if that's something that matters to you, then that's good to know. Like factor it by cheap food and stuff like that, or quality of food.
Then Christchurch would not be on top of your list. Christchurch would not be on top of your list if you're doing quality of food.
Yeah, quality of food.
Whoa. I went there for lunch today and it was pretty good. Let me just
Let's not play.
That was pretty good. Sorry.
But yeah, so it's have a think about what matters to you, like location. Like you're not really gonna know, but like if something is a complete turn off, then you want to have some say in where you end up because you're gonna live here. But again, it doesn't really massively matter as well. So yeah.
I didn't put very much thought into it at all. I went on the unique summer school, stayed in Brasenose, liked Brasenose, and then the SU's got like this little, it's like a quiz, and you can put in what you want, and I did that, and Brasenose came out on top of that, so I was like, well, might as well just apply there, and then I got in. Fun fact, the rooms that we used like a flat for the common room while we were on Unique, and that's the final year room, which feels like insane. But other than that, yeah, no, I didn't put much choice at all.
Another question? Yeah. What do you feel made you stand out within the
I argued with my tutor and I was like, right, I'm either getting in because they liked it or that's it, it's game over. I'm assuming it wasn't game over and that he didn't mind me arguing with him for a good entirety of the second interview about the meaning of two words. That is what dominated. So I was arguing about the meaning of intention and foreseeable. And I think it was that. I think it was the fact that at this point, I was so scared afterwards. I was like, what have you just done? That was not a professor. But in the interview, I forced myself to pretend it was my history teacher, so he didn't really scare me. And I think that's what it is. I think it's like realizing that they are just people and just trying to be yourself and be quite normal, but think out loud. I think that is a really big thing. Like, don't think in your head, because the fact of the matter is, no offense, you might not know the answer because they're not asking easy questions. And so you're not really going to get it right. And so your answer isn't really what's going to wow them. And it's not really what they're looking for either. It's like how you get there, what you're thinking. So if you could do all of the cool stuff that they're looking at for in your head, they're never going to know. So that's the stuff that I kind of feel like is quite important. Also chatting to other people. Like a lot of people have like interview coaching prep. I think that's a bit weird. Just because in the sense it's like you don't necessarily know what your interviewer is going to ask you, but you can just chat to other law students or other people about your subject, and that will help. Just so you don't get like nervous when someone says, so what do you think about this argument, or what do you think about this? It can be really nerve-wracking, like, I don't know, I've never studied law. Whereas if you've already had some conversations, it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, because the application process, there's just so many things that are involved, right? So one thing I thought, I realize now when I look through other people who are applying and they want me to look through their stuff, I think one thing that is helpful is like, I knew in the process of my personal statement writing, I knew I really wanted to do law because I was like ranking all of the things I enjoy about my life as, a sixth form kid, and like thinking through all the things that someone who does law would do, and I was realizing there's a lot of similarities there. And so in my personal statement, it was really kind of a journey through, these are things that I like, and these are like intellectual conversations I find interesting, and this is how it would be relevant to law. And it's just about showing that you really would enjoy engaging with the academia, because it's not really, you don't have to sell yourself as like a future like high functioning corporate lawyer. You have to sell yourself as someone who just likes reading and is like, would be an interesting person to talk to. And that's the same with the interview. They just want to know that you're someone who can think through problems. So like a lot of my prep for the interview was honestly just like thinking through these like moral conundrums and going on these fun websites that would be very like random situations. It would just be like thinking through why I would take a position, and if facts change, how I would respond to that, because that's how an interview is. And you really cannot prepare for it after a like certain extent, because for me, my interview was just, they gave me a case in trusts law, which I haven't done trusts law yet. I'm in my second year. And every time I brush across it, I'm like, this is very, very complicated. And that's what I thought when I got into my interview. And you wouldn't understand the technicalities of what they're giving you. What they're trying to just see is how you respond when they change a set of facts, and how you're able to string things together that you know to be true. So yeah, just having conversations, networking. I felt it was good because I did a lot of volunteer work when I was in high school, which allowed me to talk to people who did different things in the law. And so that was helpful, because then you have a better understanding of what are the skills that are kind of that you use every day, and if that's something that you are interested in building, or that's something that you're naturally inclined to do. And so when you're just sure for yourself that this is a degree I want to do, that overall helps you stand out in applicants who are just maybe doing it because they need something to do, or they have like a generic interest in doing the humanity or whatever. Just knowing that I have this thing I'm really passionate about, that just helps. Essentially. Yeah. Any other questions?
So what sort of supercurriculars did you do to engage with law outside of your subject?
I did the Pathways to Law program, and a lot of the things that I did from that. I did Pathways to Law and uni, and then also the Clifford Chance scheme. But what I ended up doing was sort of taking, so for example, you've all had Matt do a lecture today. On Unique, we had a lecture about a particular case, and then I went and took that case and made it, because I did politics at A level, and it was a constitutional law case. I took that, made a presentation, presented it to my politics class, and I say presented it to my politics class. There were 3 of us, and they were my best friends. So, but it was presented to my politics class. And we just had a conversation about it. So I didn't do anything, like, I've not done anything that I've had to pay for. And it was all just sort of taking things from reading from my curriculum, particularly my politics curriculum, and also history, and then just doing other research, like just sort of finding what you're interested in. I still am much more interested in sort of law and politics and governance and how that sort of works together than I am in trust, which I can confirm is complicated and not the most fun I've had in my degree all year. But yeah, I didn't do anything that I had before, and it was all sort of just finding something I was interested in and doing what you can with the information.
Yeah, I was similar. I did Pathways to Law as well, and through that I attended lectures like the one Matt gave today, and kind of basically what they want to see is from stuff you've done, how have you taken it further, like what have you learned from it, basically. So like that's when you write your personal statement, that's what you're getting out of it. So you don't need to do like 1,000 things, just do something that you find interesting. So I think when I was writing my personal statement, I attended a lecture to do with the Miller case with Brentford, and so yeah, so I kind of like took that and did some other research. I don't remember what, but that's what I ended up talking about. And also I did English, and I think I was reading Handmaid's Tale, and I used that and then linked it to what I thought about the law in general, and did some other research from that. But also read books, law books that you might find interesting. You don't have to. It's kind of just, it's more for you to figure out why you want to study law. Like, I think if you view it from, do I actually want to do this degree? Is this something I would actually enjoy? You will end up having accumulated enough stuff to be able to write the personal statement. And it will also be authentic and personal to you, and it will be more convincing that way because it is the honest truth. So like, I read this book called What About Law, which was really helpful, and it's very representative of the degree. And I spoke about like one case I read in that. But like, there are podcasts you can listen to. I think one called Law in Action that I listened to. I don't know if it's still a thing, but I listened to that one. The Guardian has a law section. If you read something interesting, like this is something you could do one evening, right? Like just have a peruse, or like there's also, Harry was mentioning the YouTube lecture series from Harvard Law to do with philosophy of law, like jurisprudence. I watched one of those. Those are very interesting, and it's kind of related to jurisprudence. So even if you don't know anything to do with law, go to the course list and read, like, what do you find interesting? Like, from today, you have a handout full of stuff. Like, if something from there genuinely spoke out to you, and you're like, that is such an interesting thing. Like, go and research it. Like, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You don't have to come up with, like, I don't know, someone was mentioning they read Hart. You don't need to read Hart, but you just need to find something that you genuinely find interesting, and convey that, basically.
Just another thought, you can also, on the assumption that they're open now, go to court. It's free, people are allowed to go and sit and watch cases. So if you've got a local magistrates or a local Crown Court, I'm from Nottinghamshire, so I just went to Nottingham Crown Court for like a morning. I ended up watching some quite interesting criminal cases, which I spoke about. In one of the cases, there was a bit of a discrepancy in the evidence that the prosecution and defence had. So the judge had to sort of stop the case and send the jury out. And
I spoke about that and sort of fair trials. So you can like see something like that and weave different things from it. So it is worth looking to see if your courts are open, see what's happening, and look at the court listings to see if like, you know, it will be more beneficial for you to go to a trial rather than like a pre-trial setting a trial date type thing. But yeah, it's worth it.
They're also online. So like the Supreme Court, I know does like summaries that are on YouTube. So if there's like a Supreme Court case that's really interesting to you, there was an Uber case that happened recently, and all I did was read like my summary. Like there's really simple things you can do. It doesn't have to be like really intensive. It's just about for yourself thinking, do I actually enjoy the law? Do I actually even care about what's happening in the law? What parts of the law do I find interesting? And why? And thinking about that in any way you can.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat too much of what's been said, so I'm just gonna try and just, like summarize the stuff that I did. So I went to the courts and I did a couple of mock trials, and that was all accidental. That wasn't like I did that before I could really be like, oh, I'm doing this to tick the box for like uni applications, which I think made it more enjoyable. A lot of the stuff that I did do for my Ucas personal statement, I actually didn't enjoy, and so I kind of stopped doing it, and it made me question if I wanted to do law. And I was like, what the hell? Because I thought I always wanted to do it. And in the end, what I ended up doing was loads of like, I did a UCL summer course, and it was like in legal philosophy, and I actually loved that. But like reading these books that like, people told me I should read if I want to do law, just pick me to see. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And that's when I realised that you don't have to do like, the things that everyone supposedly does. In fact, it's probably better not to. I think the best thing I did for mine was like, I would go about life and be like, okay, so I was an army tech, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is a military case. And we have this and like legal aspects behind that. I was like one of the only girls in my further maths class. I was one of the only people who did further maths and English. And there was this book that I read, and it was by a mathematician, and it overlapped with the law a bit. And a lot of my personal statement was basically saying, you wouldn't think law is in this subject, but here you go, here's how it relates. You wouldn't think law is in this, but here's how it relates. And like, I didn't mention Lessons for a Law Student or any of the books that my like family or friends had told me to read. And I actually think that just made it a lot more fun for me. And when I got to interview, I was like, I can tell you this really weird thing that maybe you don't know, not because you're not smart, because it's just rogue. It was a lot more like fun.
Yeah, I mean, that was the same experience for me. I enjoyed everything I did, but that was kind of because I didn't even, during my personal statement writing, I didn't realize that I was doing law until quite late into the fact that I had to submit a personal statement. And I mean, I applied for neuroscience everywhere. Like, I'm an international applicant. I applied to like 8 countries, and 7 of those countries were for neuroscience, and UK was the only country I applied to for law. And so a lot of my activities were STEM subject things. So I was like volunteering at vet clinics, and I was doing like, I guess, a lot of reading into really niche stuff that I was super interested in, but didn't have the closest connection to law. But I did the same thing where in my presentation, I talked about this random case that was highlighted in one of my bio textbooks about like genetic data privacy. And like, I kind of just followed that up with basically the case on a European level and how like different jurisdictions work together to solve those issues. And that was something that I did kind of my own interest before I really realized that I enjoyed the law, because I just ended up realizing that a lot of the things that I would Google in my extra time would be like regulatory things, or things about like how rules were made and how like things that you feel about get kind of communicated on like a societal level. And so I wouldn't say I did a lot of activities that were like, you have to do this many MUNs to send in whatever a statement, or you have to like do an XYZ thing to be a law applicant. Because I don't think there is such a thing. I think laws, like the best thing about the law is that you can do so many things. And as long as you relate a skill or a way of seeing society or a way of seeing people that has a legal lens to it, then that's perfect. Like you just have to be the kind of person who's curious about things and see how things work together. So don't worry, like don't stress too much if you don't have the opportunities available to you to really like, set things of like, I need to read these books, I need to do these things. Like the law is very flexible and you can find the law in most aspects of your life. So yeah. So.
Yeah.
I would say, like, yeah, it's obviously very high, it's Oxford, but I think one thing I've come to learn here is that the work will be done. Like, so I'm not a very structured person. I think some people can work on this like 9 to 6 schedule and get all their work, or work they plan to do that day done. I can't do that. I've got too many activities during the day. So sometimes, I might stay up a bit later and do the work just because, it needs to be done. But yeah, I think if it does ever get too much, there is always the option of asking for extensions, for example. And like my tutors, with my experience, they've been very kindly granting them, but like, they understand that you're a human being. You're not a robot. You're not gonna, get all the reading lists done and like get everything in on time. There are some times when you need some extra time, or you need more time to think and more time to just digest things. So yeah, so like in the event of feeling overwhelmed and thinking that it's too much, I would ask for extension. But yeah, I think workload-wise, you also just learn to prioritize. You learn to know what's important on the reading list, what can be left, for holidays, and what can, be just skim read. So I think in the beginning it's quite tough because you're dumped into it, given a big reading list, and there you go. But with time, you adapt and you learn how to do these things, and you acquire these skills really quickly.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I remember when I came to this, like an event like this, and one of the Brazos always said to me, "Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it gets done. It's fine. It's manageable." I got here in first term, first year, and I went, "They lied to me." So I want to caveat it with, it doesn't feel like it is, but within like 3 weeks, you A, learn how to read a reading list, you B, realize you don't read everything on the reading list. It's not really possible and you're not expected to. And also, one thing that surprised me, albeit only this year because of COVID, is that despite the workload, you can actually still have a good social life. I'm involved in more societies than maybe I should be, but I'm involved in quite a few societies. I do quite a lot of stuff outside of my degree. I go out quite a bit. I've managed to have fun. So yeah, I'm working more than a lot of my friends, i.e. my friends not at Oxford. And I'm always a lot busier than them, but I was always a lot busier than them at school as well. I'd like to be quite busy. And so it's yeah, it is frustrating when you're writing your 6th essay of term and your friends in a second. But it's also really satisfying when I get to the term and I'm like, I did not think I was going to get that essay in, and I just did that. And then you can go out again and have a social. And it's great. But yeah, I think it's way more satisfying once you're a few weeks in and the stress of it kind of calms down. You very much do go, oh, another essay, okay, and you just get it done. And it's just it is manageable. It just takes some adjustment.
No, I was just gonna say it's like any other uni or any other experience in life where it's you just get a lot better at it once you get used to it. So in my first year, one of the reasons I was very stressed in my first year was because I didn't really know how to approach a reading list, right? I didn't really know my own learning style well enough because I had a break during COVID where I didn't have to read for an exam for quite a bit of time. And so I forgot, or maybe with the load that I had, the things that I did in high school just did not work for me. They weren't producing the immediate results that they used to. And I didn't have 2 months to learn one topic. I had 4 days to learn one topic. And so that means that you really have to figure out how you best synthesize information. And once you get there, once you know, this is how I like, I'm more of a lecture person, I'm more of a reading person. This is the kind of mix that works for me. And I'm a collaborative person. So it helps me when I talk to my friends about the topic that we have this week. And doing things to make learning easier for you, once you figure out what those techniques are for you, things that are so much easier because you're not wasting that, just essentially staring at a page for 4 hours hoping something makes sense to you. You realize, oh, there are these lines that I don't understand at all. You just ask the tutor about it later. Because that's one of the very cool things about being at Oxford or having a close connection with your tutors is that you can just come back to things that you don't understand. You don't have to just feel tortured by the amount of work that you have. And you can reach out for help when you need to, because everyone in Oxford struggles at some point in the term. It's a very intense term. You have as many vacation days as you have term time days. And that feels like luxury, but that also means that it's a very intense work life. But it's actually so manageable. And when you love it, I actually feel especially this term, because I really enjoyed the modules I was doing. At the end of the 8 weeks, I'm I could do this for 7 more weeks just because you enjoy it so much. And you're it was very stressful while it was happening, but you just really want to progress through the weeks. So it's quite rewarding at the end of the day, and you really do live a life. So manageable, you can do it. We believe in you. Yes.
discussion like that. What was your biggest shock when you got to university?
To learn how to do laundry. Sorry, I know that's not specific, but I did not know how you did that.
I mean, I think the most surprising thing to me was that everyone was a bit of a geek here. Like, maybe that's very odd, but I was really expecting sort of like elitism, or maybe that everyone was just naturally intelligent and got everything at once, and I would just struggle a lot because I was quite decent in high school, but not maybe the best in my high school. And so I was very, very surprised when I got here because no one in my school had before. And so I presumed there had been some sort of huge clerical error. But you come here and you realize that everyone just wants to live their life, like everyone has their special interests, and you find people who connect with you on this really like weird nerd level that's really, really nice about uni. It's like any uni, you'll find these like really niches of culture that you appreciate that is just wonderful in a way that in school you just don't have the time to do that, or you don't know yourself well enough to be like, this is the passion that I have. And so it's really nice that you come into uni and it's not just work, it's also about figuring things out together and like sharing interests with people, watching movies together or whatever. Like it's a good time, and you can really you can make the university community work for you in a way that's really lovely.
I'd say for me, having like all of your free time to decide what you want to do with it. Like nobody's telling you have to get up at 7 a.m. to go to school. I found that really hard at first. I didn't think I would. I thought I'd, hate, like going to school is annoying. Like you have to do it, so it's annoying. But I really like the structure. Looking back, like having someone tell me what to do and when was really helpful, because that's how my brain worked, and it meant that I could just do the work I needed when I needed to do it. But when you come to uni, you have a deadline and you have tutes that you have to go to, tutorials that you have to go to. But how you decide to do the work and when you do it is entirely up to you. And I'm still working on how to figure that out, because the work still gets done. But if I wanted to spend the whole day not doing anything, I could, and I sometimes do. I'm not going to lie. But kind of figuring that out is like a massive personal journey as well, figuring out how you like to do things, how does your brain work. Something that's really interesting that you don't get the luxury to do at school. I also think you have more time, even though the workload is more, you have more time at uni than you do at school, because you have so much time that you get to decide how you spend it. So if you find that some weeks the work is easy and you want to get it out of the way, or then you can do that. Like that's an option. And even though the workload is a lot and the terms are quite short, you have vacations. Like we have a 6-week off, like no deadlines, no nothing. If I wanted to sleep for the 6 weeks, I could sleep for the 6 weeks. Like there's freedom in that, and being able to explore that freedom and be an adult. That's kind of fun sometimes.
I think a shock for me was how much the lack of choice in the degree would bother me. Because the Oxford degree, you get very little choice. You get 2 options, and you get 1 mini option in juris. And I thought that's okay, because there's a certain amount of things you have to do, and then Oxford say you have to do these other things. But yeah, I was surprised how annoyed I was by that, because because terms are so busy, there's very little time to sort of, if you find something particularly interesting, to follow it until the holidays, and then you've got revision and a life. But yeah, I think that's something, because some of the law is really boring. I hate to break it to you, but some of it is really dull. And what I find boring, it might not be what you find boring, as with everything. But I think that lack of choice can make it feel quite difficult at times. And yeah, sometimes it can be like when you've got to do this particular module, aka trust, that you just don't want to do because you're not that interested. The lack of sort of, it's okay because I'll get to choose what to do next, feels a bit sort of constraining. But then the faculty have introduced a dissertation option, so you can do that now, which is fun.
Yeah, I mean that's one which like
like beyond the prestige of it, there are some practical things about Oxford that might work for you and might not work for you, and that's something that you should decide when you're applying. If you're deciding with us in Cambridge, if you're deciding with us in another uni, if you're deciding on uni at all, like that's one thing. I'm quite okay with the fact that we do everything because I didn't have a specific thing that I enjoyed, so it's like let them decide for me. But it doesn't work for some people, and one other thing that makes Oxford quite unique is our examination style, because we do one exam basically 5 months after you start the course, which doesn't really mean anything, and then we do everything else in your degree, we test it at the end of third year in like a very intense couple of weeks. And that's different from some other unis. Cambridge does yearly exam, and some other unis do like every term, start semester, you do exams, and so you don't have to think about that again for quite some time. And that examination style might work better for some people, and you might want to consider that if you're applying. Like it's one of those things that I like, because essentially what Oxford says is that you get the time to really think through all these different topics that you're doing to kind of come together for these larger structures that are tying together all of private law, connecting private law and public law in a way that you don't have to do if you just leave one topic as soon as you finish it. Like how they advertise is that it allows you to really make connections over litigation and really settle and think through things. Because it's essentially Oxford is a very academic degree in a way that a lot of other universities are more practical. And obviously the law is a very practical subject. So if you might prefer a different learning style. So that's something to consider. You don't have to apply to Oxford, but you should think of the considerations that you have in mind before you do. Once you do, you'll realize like you can't get used to everything. So yeah.
Go right back and then I'll
how do you guys spend your off-term weeks? Do you work or study, or what is expected?
So at the start of every term, you have these sort of mock exams called collections, and they're just to test like things that you've learned the previous term. So personally, the way I spend my holidays would be, I would take about a week or two off completely, so just doing no work and just relaxing, catching up on sleep, whatever. And then when I go back home, I also have a small part-time job, so it's a 0-hour contract, so it's very flexible. So I, spend some time working there, and then after those 2 weeks of like complete rest, I would slowly start integrating work back again. So personally, I don't watch lectures during term time. I just don't have the time to. So I would start by watching lectures, and I'd start by catching up on reading. And it just depends, like the workload depends on how much I didn't do during term time. So, because essentially it is catch up and trying to either consolidate certain topics or understand them slightly better. So, it's a mix of, working for me, studying, and then also just seeing my friends, because obviously I haven't seen them for like 10 weeks, friends from back home. So, it's a mixture, and it varies from holiday to holiday, just because obviously it depends how much or how little work I did the previous term. And then the summer holidays, I think, are entirely different just because they're so long. So, then I would try and travel or just do a bit more leisurely kind of stuff.
I'll sleep for a week. Every time I basically sleep for at least 3 days, to be serious. I'm quite looking forward to doing that in the next 3 days. That's quite common. Like my whole class, something that we choose to sort of stay now that we can, because we can stay like outside of term time. We do tend to stay and we just sleep, and then we go and explore the city, which is quite nice because maybe you don't get time to do that during term. I think taking some off time during back is really nice. And then I always make the effort when I'm home to try and make the effort to see my friends, like my home friends. Because I will be honest, I'm not as good at being on top of it when I'm in Oxford, because things are really busy here. So I always do that, and then honestly having some sort of timetable for working, because working chaotically all the time isn't necessary. A, because there's no deadlines to go back, and B, because you need a break. So I do think that always helps. I'll either do an afternoon stint or a morning stint most days during the back, so that I'm never working all day, and then it's only the final week I'll move back to Oxford a little bit early, and I'll start working with the exams that Annie mentioned. But on the whole, that's there to recuperate from the chaotic 8 weeks and prepare for the next step. So I do think it's quite nice to be able to switch off a bit. Obviously not entirely, you do need to catch up on everything you did do, but I do think rewinding is so nice.
I think
what you do in the holiday also depends on where you are in your degree. So your first back, the Christmas of your first year will feel quite stressful because you have exams at the end of the next term and very little time to go over the first term's content in the second term because you're doing the second term's content. And it is a bit chaotic, so you might have to spend a bit of time doing that, but by no means spend all your time back. You might have a lot. But the back after your mods might be nice. I didn't get that my mods because but might be nice.
It was nice.
It was
so good. It was really nice. It was worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did get that back. And then in the middle of the second year, so the summer between second and third year, there's an essay to do that does count for part of your degree. And then obviously the back's in the final year, the Christmas back I spent writing my dissertation, and this is the back now, which will obviously be spent revision. But you do get a long time for revision. I've not had any classes since 5th week, which was about Valentine's Day. So there's plenty of time sort of after to sort of catch up as well as in the back. So by no means spend all of you back thinking you've got to be
For those of you wanting to become a lawyer in the future, will it be as a barrister or as a solicitor, and why?
For me, well, I always had a childhood dream of becoming a barrister. Now, having studied law and being exposed to things like mooting and stuff like that, I'm not entirely sure. I think barrister is still the route I want to go to, just because I prefer, or at least I think I prefer like advocacy in comparison to like working in an office. And I do enjoy mooting. I just personally haven't had enough time to do it as much as I wanted to this term. So but because I have my year abroad next year, I kind of have been slightly lazy in thinking, I can put it off and think about what I want to do next. But I think if I do go down the lawyer route rather than say academia or something else, I would be a barrister.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's scary is the question that you're asking me, the question you ask yourself every day. I'm like, what should I do? For me, I mean, my home country is there's no divide. So I would train as a solicitor here, just because it's easily more transferable when I go back home, or if I want to work in a different jurisdiction eventually. So that just is more flexible because a barrister is very grounded in the UK. And it's just a lot more competitive in some respects. And just naturally the style of work, it's more individual in a way that is really, really cool if you're really, really good at it. But for me, I would just feel very lonely and unanchored without like a group being like, these are the deadlines, these are what we are working with. And I really enjoy the kind of idea of being with people who are really, really like a specialist in something I don't know anything about. And that's something solicitors just get to dive into a bit more. So that's what I think is good. I know lots of people as well who, after coming into Oxford, they end up realizing that they really want to do academia, which is something that in a lot of other universities would be like, what kind of useless life path is that? But in Oxford, we love academics. You just end up thinking of those kind of life paths as well, beyond just solicitor, barrister. Someone else with strong.
Yeah, I'm going on this solicitor route. So my reasoning is kind of similar, but also I was like economics and like business. And so I'm going on like commercial solicitor route because it's like the perfect integration for me. And I guess I was fortunate enough to have exposed myself quite early on. I had like work experience when I was younger, pre-COVID. So it's like I was lucky that I could be in person. And it just meant that I kind of know that's why I was like, and I enjoyed it. And then the idea of like being able to continue with economics in a business sense and actually being involved with businesses and understanding clients and stuff seemed like a win. So that's why I chose it. And like working as a team is personally way nicer than like being self-employed.
I do not want to go into academia. Cannot think of anything worse I could be doing. Genuinely, I like my degree, but I definitely want to stop it after finals. When I leave school, which just because it just doesn't, as much as like you have to do the degree, but if it doesn't excite you, it doesn't excite you. The same reason I don't want to go into barrister route. I do like working with people. I work better with people than I do on my own. And I try to explore other career options, but I realize I still like the law in some aspects, so I'll keep it. But I think one thing that's really exciting with law is you don't have to stick to it. Like, you really, if you wanted to do anything in the world, you could do it, and it's a good degree for that, and you learn a lot of skills. But even if I decide to change my mind, I've made the decision that at the beginning of my career I want to qualify as a lawyer because it is quite difficult and intense. So if I change my mind later on in life, I feel like I'll regret it. But with any decisions, I don't think you're going to have like a solid 100% reason. Even when you decide what to pick for your degree, you're going to always have that thing of, there's so many options, I could so easily do something else, and what if that thing is the thing for me? But I think it's important not to deep things too much and kind of just do whatever you end up doing, and there's always the option to change your life course. Yeah.
Bryony's already such a final student, so, and you can tell, but you've come to a different decision.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, honestly, to be fair with you, I'm like 6 months away from graduation and I've not got a clue what I'm doing after. But I know it's not. I'm not interested in either solicitoring or barristering, though I would have, after having done my dissertation, maybe would consider academia, which is a bit rogue for me, but maybe, probably not in specifically law, maybe more like sociology and policy and sort of that kind of vibe rather than specifically law. But yeah, no, I'm considering sort of maybe social work or some sort of like social policy masters, because that's kind of what I found I'm interested in. But I don't regret doing law, because I don't think that had I not done law, I would have found that interest, and that was through sort of my modules here. So yeah, no, I'm not doing that.
How do your lectures work? Like your actual lecture class, and I read you like is it from my lecture, and like are the tutors that lecture you from the tutors?
So lectures are run by the faculty. So the faculty will, like, all law students across all colleges go to the same lectures. Some lectures have been sort of a bit funny recently, whether they're online or in person. And then you'll have seminars and tutorials, which will be taught by your specific tutors within colleges, which will vary between colleges. I personally don't really get much from lectures. I'm not the kind of person that can sit and just listen to people talk. I tend to use lectures as like a revision material, so I'll go back over the recordings, only over the subjects that I specifically want to get that sort of thing from. However, not going to the lectures does kind of mean a bit more reading, in terms of reading the background of the textbook. But that's something I'm okay with, because that's how I learn better. So lectures is kind of, you are supposed to go to them, but nobody checks. But yeah, it's how you use lectures is up to you, whether that's sort of somewhere to get your key information. However, in finals, so the 2 modules you get picked in finals, lectures do become sort of something you have to go to, because that's part of it, otherwise you won't get that information from the course. So yes, it's about like what you prefer. In terms of hours, you're probably looking at like 6 or 7 hours of lectures a week. But also, honestly, sometimes you cannot fit that in. I think somebody said earlier about not having time to go to lectures, or genuinely sometimes you can't fit the time to go to lectures, or it would be best than doing some other reading.
Just to quickly add, because you said where does the main bit of your like teaching come from? It comes from the tutes, but I think more importantly it also comes from the essays. But we don't write copious amounts of essays for the sake of it. We write, sorry, I'm confused there. We write those essays because we get feedback on every single. You should get feedback on every single one. So it really does help, especially if you have a really good tutor. Like one of my tutors right now, wrote a mini essay on the bottom of my essay. And so like you do like get a lot of your learning from doing those essays, which I was surprised about. And like the more effort you can put into an essay, trust me, you get out.
Yeah, the Ucas are very, very invested in making sure that you can come out with a legal opinion at the end of your degree. So you will like it's so good about being here because there's like a personalized level of attention that's like they want you to do well, they're here for you to do well, and what my tutor always says is there's a service available for you to use. And so like if you're having difficulties or there are like bits of something that's just not making sense to you, not coming together, then it, like unlike lectures where only one person is speaking, tutors are the place where you can go and be like, these are chunks that I'm just not getting. I've done my reading, I've done my lectures, please help me out. I don't want to feel like I'm failing. And they would be like, I've got you. And as long as you've got specific questions, then that's a really, really good place for learning. I mean, your peers are also such a good place for learning because I know like my year group at Martin, like we try to do discussions about bits over the vacation that some of us were more confident in, some of us scored better in, and some of us were just like, we struggled so much and we didn't know what to read. And so like they kind of help you figure out what is really relevant as well. But the lectures, like I love the lectures. I'm a very lecture person, but I know a lot of people who never step into the lecture room, and that's fine. It just really it depends on what your learning style is. For me, I'd rather do 4 hours of lectures than spend 9 hours reading something that this person who's in front of me has written. And that works for me. But for a lot of people, they need the depth and the visual reading to get information to sink in. And because you have to write essays every week, you have to ensure that you're understanding things. And so don't stick to things again and again that are not working for you. Like I know people who like just didn't do any lectures for a year and then realized that they love lectures in second year because they didn't even give it a chance. And I know people who just kept on doing the reading despite realizing that there were huge chunks of it that were just not working with it. So once you figure out what works for you, then just stick to that. Yeah.
Hey guys, it's 4:30. I just want to get here at 4:30. So the lessons on